Chapter 680. New thoughts after receiving the world's consenting nod and confirming the matter regarding Louis Veen. Furs thought for a moment and continued. Everyone, does anyone have a meteorite crystal, or the crystallized blood of a Lavos squid, or any information about them? These were the main ingredients of the astrologer potion formula. Furs originally planned on continuing her requests, hoping that Mr. Moon, who was also in Backlund, could help her find Louis Veen. But after some consideration, she decided to first do it herself. Only after confirming that there aren't any solutions or clues would she then request the Tarot Club for help. Meteorite crystal? Lavos squid's crystallized blood? Sounds familiar. Isn't this because I know the seer potion formula? Yes, it's familiar because the seer potion formula's main ingredients is 50 grams of star crystal and 10 milliliters of Lavos squid blood. The main ingredients of astrologer are like the upgraded versions of a seer. Indeed, the apprentice and seer pathway can be interchanged in the future. With this in mind, Klein suddenly had an idea. Since the potion formula of Bizarro Sorcerer is difficult to obtain, with the 3 options being extremely dangerous, should I consider the other sequence 4 options in the neighboring pathways? Such as apprentice. Once he had this idea, he brightened up as he felt that most of his predicament had vanished. And for the sequence 4 potion formula of apprentice, the Tarot Club has clues to it. It's the Abraham family behind the magician. With this in mind, the world looked at Miss Magician with a subconscious gentleness to his gaze. It left Furs shuddering, suspecting whether Mr. World had already formulated a plan to hunt Louis Veen. At this moment, the fool Klein recalled another problem. According to Dunn's and Daly's theories, the first 5 sequences of the seer pathway didn't present any obvious progression. Each of them presented a beyonder power of one aspect. Then at the critical point of sequence 4, the 5 of them would converge and clench like a fist, presenting a qualitative change. Back when Captain and Ma'am Daly made this theory, they only knew bits of information regarding seer, clown, and magician. I'm only able to verify this idea for the subsequent faceless and marionettist by myself. So, could it be that seer, apprentice, and the possible marauder pathways cannot be interchanged at sequence 4? But at sequence 3? Klein slowly felt his joy dwindle again. He knew too little, and was temporarily unable to make a judgment. All he could do was await Mr. Azek's reply, and wait to leave the waters which were watched by the true creator, before contacting a Rhodes. As Klein was thinking, he suddenly heard Catlia say, I have the crystallized blood of a Lavos squid. It will cost 600 pounds. As for meteorite crystal, I know where to get it from. How many grams do you need? 600 pounds, a very reasonable price. Furs replied in a pleasant surprise, 60 grams. All right, I'll give them to you within 2 weeks. It will also cost 600 pounds. Catlia said clearly and succinctly. It's resolved just like that. Today's Ma'am Hermit is really proactive with the desire to participate. Yes, she had just been. Furs quickly nodded. That wouldn't be an issue. I have 830 pounds in savings. That's enough for me to buy the crystallized blood of a Lavos squid. But in 2 weeks, I still need to save up nearly 400 pounds. The royalties after the new year will be paid soon. It's about 150 pounds. Making me lack 220 pounds. I have to think of ways to earn money again. Furs quickly calculated her financial situation. Seeing how Miss Magician took only a minute to gather the main ingredients for her potion, Justice Audrey couldn't hold back either. She raised her hand slightly and said, I wish to obtain the complete pituitary gland of an adolescent mind dragon. But if that's not possible, 60 milliliters of a black hunting giant lizard's spinal fluid, and 1 fruit of an illusory chime tree. This was the main ingredient of the hypnotist potion. If she obtained the complete pituitary gland of the adolescent mind dragon, then there was no need for any other corresponding ingredients. Just as Audrey said that, she heard Ma'am Hermit reply, Since the 5th epoch, mind dragons have nearly gone extinct and are hard to find. I have the means of obtaining the spinal fluid of a black hunting giant lizard, but it will also take 2 to 3 weeks. The price ranges from 1,500 to 2,000 pounds, as I'm not the one who decides it. I can help you keep a lookout for the fruit of an illusory chime tree, but I cannot guarantee anything. What great efficiency. After Ma'am Hermit was punished, her sense of belonging towards the tarot club has appeared to increase. She's more active and amiable. Audrey was momentarily speechless. After a few seconds of silence, she bowed slightly and said, "No problem." Alger, who had been watching by the side, suddenly felt that the development wasn't going as he expected. Having been punished by Mr. Fool, the hermit changed her style of being mostly an observer. She began to involve herself in every matter that she could involve herself in during the tarot gathering. And with the strength, background, resources, and channels of a pirate admiral, she immediately produced intense and blinding light. This blinded Alger so much that he could hardly open his eyes. He had a strong feeling that he was at risk. At that moment, he wished for Ma'am Hermit to return to her former state. Klein also felt surprised by what he heard and saw. I thought Ma'am Hermit would be silent for some time, feeling an aversion to the tarot club for some time. But in the end, is she the type that needs to be beaten in order to be obedient? Yes, sparing the rod spoils the child. Queen Mystic must have spared the rod too much. The way Queen Mystic does things isn't much to speak of either. The Emperor has also spared the rod. As he lampooned, Klein controlled the world, making him survey the area before chuckling. Does any one of you have the potion formula of the Seer Pathways Sequence 4? Or have any clues regarding it? Sequence 4. Mr. World is beginning to advance towards the realm of a demigod? Audrey was surprised. She originally imagined that she was advancing sufficiently fast, and she felt a little proud about that. But now, she suddenly realized that she was falling behind. Mr. World has instantly become really lofty. Furs was similarly surprised. Although she felt that the silent, reserved, and unsocial Mr. World was a powerful beyonder, she believed that he was still very far from a demigod, from a Sequence 4. But to her surprise, he was already seeking to purchase the Sequence 4 potion formula. As expected of Mr. Fool's blessed, Alger sighed. Likewise, Emlyn and Derek shook their heads, expressing that they had never heard of the name of the Pathways Sequence 4. Klein, who believed that he could obtain clues from the City of Silver or the Sanguine, could only helplessly retract the world's gaze. After a few seconds, Catlia said, "I need a drop of blood from a mythical creature, regardless of the kind." In the palace held up by stone columns, silence suddenly became the main symphony. Even the world didn't know the exact concept of what a mythical creature was. Klein didn't expose this point, as he planned on inquiring about it to the people he could ask in the future. He controlled the world to remain silent for a few seconds before saying, "I'll keep an eye out." As this was a rare request from Ma'am Hermit, Justice and company also gave similar responses. All right. Catlia wasn't surprised by this outcome. The only reason why she made the request was to express her attitude of being integrated with the Tarot Club to Mr. Fool. She believed that this was better than trembling and being apprehensive at eliminating the aftereffects of what had happened. After a brief pause, Derek was about to say something when Emlyn spoke out ahead of him. The Sanguine Baron chuckled. "The request for our row is clear. He wants the Sun Sequence 6 Notary's potion formula, and Mr. Hanged Man wishes to obtain the Ocean Songsters." Upon hearing this, Klein suddenly felt a little guilt-ridden. When he first obtained Creeping Hunger, he had wished to quickly release the Priest of Light in it, and obtaining the Sequence 6 and 5 potion formulas of the Sun Pathway, so as to sell it to Little Sunday. Yet he hadn't completed it all this while. "I'll walk around Toscarter's Pier tonight. I'll find a pirate with beyonder powers who deserves to die, or some gang leader to settle this emergency, regardless of which sequence they are. Or, I can directly release the Priest of Light." Klein made the world deliberate before saying, "I'll provide you with the notary potion formula in 3 days. Upon saying this, he looked at Little Sunday. "You can consider what item you wish to exchange for it." "All right, Mr. World," Derek replied in glee. As for the Ocean Songster potion formula which the Hanged Man needed, everyone didn't have any clues. Emlyn cleared his throat and said, "My request is different from the last one. I hope that you can help me find the believers of the primordial moon." Every effective clue will be rewarded with £100. A direct confirmation will be £500. He looked at Mr. Fool to make a request, and after obtaining his approval, he conjured 5 things that resembled bounty notices. Each person received a set of the 5 bounties. He and Derek didn't have one. Klein controlled the world to pick it up and casually browsed through it. Gallus Kevin, Dandy Lara Windsor bearing Argos. They aren't weak at all. At the very least, they're equivalent to recently born vampires. He silently muttered to himself as he memorized the corresponding information. After completing this matter, Emlyn felt more confident about winning the competition. He leaned back casually and waited for the other members to issue requests. This time, no one spoke again. Upon seeing this, the fool Klein chuckled. Continue your free exchange. Instantly, Audrey, Alger, Catlia and company cast their eyes at Derek. They remembered that the son had previously mentioned that he would have arrangements to join an exploration mission that involved the periphery of the Giant King's court. Chapter 681. Indirect answer being the main focus of attention, Derek didn't choke. He eagerly said, I've recently been in an exploration team led by the chief to Afternoon Town. It's a key gateway that leads to the Giant King's court. It's a door that separates myth from reality. His opening perfectly garnered the interest of all the Tarot Club members, as they awaited the rest of his account in different postures. Derek skipped the unimportant experiences that they had during the journey, and he directly started his story from Afternoon Town. He first described the dead silence and darkness before how his 3-member team discovered an underground altar. He then described how he identified the names Ouroboros, Medici and Sasser, and entered another side of the town without realizing it. There, he saw the titles such as Dark Angel and the words Rose Redemption. Having said that, he thanked Mr. Fool once again for his help from the predicament. Then, Derek simply introduced the monsters that transformed from their shadows, before emphasizing the ecclesiastic, who was in constant penitence in the half-collapsed cathedral. He used his own words to describe what was said, mentioning that the ecclesiastic suddenly self-destructed when he was about to say the name of the 4th king of angels, and was burnt to a crisp by a transparent flame. Another king of angels. And the mood in Afternoon Town is really dark and scary. The ecclesiastic's penitence has a very a feel of a prophet predicting a calamity. Audrey listened in relish as she had her interest about the blank line, an unspeakable name peaked. At this moment, Derek turned his body and looked at the end of the bronze table, sincerely asking, Mr. Fool, who was it that tempted Dark Angel Sasser? Who does the 4th name refer to? Why can't it be said? Here it comes. Behind the gray fog, Klein's smile nearly froze. The reason that he had hurriedly sent Little Son back to the real world was that he was afraid of facing such a question. Back then, he was worried that Little Son would inquire about Dark Angel Sasser, and now, he was facing a question he didn't know the answer to. Thankfully, a magician never performed unprepared. After that day, Klein undoubtedly began to seriously consider how to answer such questions. Now, with great confidence, he landed his right palm on the armrest and said with a deep, meaningful glint in his eyes, It's because it's a secret. He used his eyes and body language to hint to the Tarot Club members that secret wasn't to be taken at face level, and it had a deeper, more substantial meaning. As for what it was, they had to figure it out themselves. Deities had deep reasons to conceal certain matters. After finishing this series of actions, Klein couldn't help but feel penitent. He felt that his charlatan vibes were increasing. Meanwhile, he felt regret that the hermit's prying into his secrets was a result of his temptations. This was because Mr. Fool would use his eyes and body language to provide additional hints. Therefore, all the members would subconsciously observe his attitude. That's because I have no solutions. Without doing this, how am I supposed to continue the act? It's not like I'm a real evil god. Klein sighed silently. Secret? The name itself is a secret? The content which Mr. Fool wishes to point out is in here? Which names are secrets themselves? True gods at sequence 0? Alger instantly thought of many things, as he came up with a theory. by combining many of the matters which Little Sun had previously mentioned. When a name itself becomes a secret, it means that the matter involves a true god. Furthermore, it's very likely to have the Evernight goddess involved. It's because she's the mother of secrets. The extreme danger of the darkness in the forsaken land of the gods indirectly proves this point. Katlia came up with an unconfirmed theory based on the knowledge she had and the hint from Mr. Fool. Meanwhile, she was almost certain that the calamity the ecclesiastic was referring to was the cataclysm that ended the third epoch. A king of angels who was tempted, afternoon town residents who fell from grace, a town being corrupted bit by bit, a black flower of calamity that blooms. All of that buried an epoch, creating the forsaken land of the gods. What a heavy sense of history. Katlia couldn't help but think poignantly. While the Tarot Club members were in contemplation, Klein also began to analyze the reason for the empty name, and the reason why it couldn't be said. Could it be the true name of a deity? A true god had tempted Dark Angel Sasrar, and the fourth name representing the King of Angels also became a true god later? But it's not like I haven't said the true name of a deity before. Primordial Demoness Cheek is understood by many to be on the same level as the seven deities. It's not like anything happened in the end. Perhaps it has something to do with the language used. The languages of Lone, Intis and Fasak, and even ancient Fasak, do not possess the ability to stir the powers of nature. On the other hand, the commonly used Jotun in the city of Silver can. That ecclesiastic likely used a similar language. I should later try to pronounce cheek using Jotun? Then, I'll die on the spot and succeed in courting death. Forget it. Besides, having a blank name and an unspeakable name means different things. I've no idea why. At this moment, seeing how Little Sun was still in a confused daze without understanding Mr. Fool's meaningful hint, Alger volunteered to give an explanation. The two names might separately represent two deities, so they cannot be said. Perhaps the true creator had tempted Dark Angel Sasrar, leading to the fall from grace of the few kings of angels and the residents of Afternoon Town. This brought about a great calamity. It's why he has a temple and statue in your forsaken land of the gods. The fourth name that corresponds to a king of angels might have benefited greatly from the calamity and succeeded in advancing to become a true god. This is similar to my guess, but they can't be confirmed. Katlia didn't supplement, as she didn't believe that their theories were facts. Audrey, Furs, and Emlyn listened attentively, as they couldn't help but feel poignant that the Tarot Club often made things appear especially high-end when discussing such matters. Things like kings of angels, evil gods and real gods, or ancient secrets all depended on a single word. Is that so? I get it. Derek came to a realization as he earnestly thanked Mr. Fool once again. Just as he was about to turn around, he suddenly recalled something and worriedly asked, Mr. Fool, is the crux to leaving the forsaken land of the gods really in the Giant King's court? After all this time, he had already accepted Mr. Hanged Man's take that the region where the City of Silver was located was known as the forsaken land of the gods. That's what I believe, but the problem is that I'm unable to confirm it. To not search for the sea and switch to exploring the Giant King's court was likely Shepherd Lovia's suggestion. This can partially verify my theory, but it cannot eliminate the possibility that it's a conspiracy. The Fool Klein's smile nearly froze again. His thoughts raced as he quickly thought of a solution that didn't need him to give a direct answer without tarnishing Mr. Fool's reputation. He immediately gave a relaxed chuckle, turned his head at the hermit Katlia. Speaking of this matter, Bernadette already knows the method for entering the forsaken land of the gods. Katlia immediately recalled her vague memories of the dream, and subconsciously looked at the end of the bronze table. It's that shadow. Before she finished speaking, she suddenly realized that she was sizing up Mr. Fool again. She hurriedly closed her eyes and said, My eye of mystery prying is instinctive. It can only be enhanced, and not be deactivated. I need to rely on a mystical item to seal it. But it doesn't exist here. Is that so? Klein nodded gently. You can conjure a pair of glasses. Yes, Mr. Fool. Katlia followed the instructions and conjured a pair of glasses. During this process, Klein stirred a minute amount of the power above the gray fog and infused them into the pair of glasses. By the time Katlia wore them, she discovered that her eye of mystery prying had been sealed as she had expected. It was only at this point that Furs and company realized that Ma'am Hermit's eyes were extremely special. It had something to do with the prying of mysteries, and it didn't need to be activated to use it. It's no wonder we didn't notice it. Ma'am Hermit was severely injured because of her attempt to pry into the mysteries of Mr. Fool. Audrey moved her lips in enlightenment, having one of her questions answered. As for Alger, who recalled how the hermit had previously sized him up, and how he had been wearing the clergy clothes of the Church of Storms, his face nearly darkened. Klein didn't wait for the members to calm down. He chuckled and replied to Katlia's previous question. It's that shadow. The shadow of the Giant King's court. So it's the shadow of the Giant King's court, Katlia muttered in pleasant surprise. Then, her mind went adrift as she thought. She likely also knows this answer. Derek spent a few seconds to digest the conversation between Ma'am Hermit and Mr. Fool, and he vaguely came to a realization. The key to entering the forsaken land of the gods had to do with the shadow of the Giant King's court. Therefore, the crux to leaving the forsaken land of the gods is really in the Giant King's court? Derek's heart palpitated as he bowed his head in excitement. Thank you for your answer, Mr. Fool. Phew. Klein silently heaved a sigh of relief. He felt that such a situation was extremely draining on his brain. Alger kept his emotions in check as he looked around before looking at the hermit. Where's the shadow of the Giant King's court? He didn't dare ask Mr. Fool, as his question about the forsaken land of the gods had previously been rejected. Katlia answered frankly. In the waters on the easternmost front of the Sonia Sea. In the dream of the night time there. I happen to wish to share with all of you what I encountered this time. Audrey and Furs simultaneously slowed their breathing, as they waited excitedly for Ma'am Hermit to recount her encounters, which were bound to be fantastic. Chapter 682. Seeking food. Katlia controlled herself, without looking at the world Gehrman. She said in a deep and slow voice. Northeast from the Gargas archipelago, there's a safe sea route that allows one to enter those dangerous waters. She began her description with the deep abyss which separated the seas, the sun chariot which couldn't be viewed directly, the night which required sleeping, the terrifying ravings that filled the entire sea, and the shadow of the Giant King's court, which stood on the opposite mountain peak in the dream world. During this process, she didn't mention Gehrman Sparrow at all, deliberately avoiding any mention of him. As for the abnormalities that happened en route, she described them simply, such as the remnant aura of Mother Earth, which caused hair to grow rapidly. Towards the end, she placed her focus on the ruin with the sleeping corpse, and the adventurer's sailboat, which had the words written in blood, Fountain of Unaging. This might mean that the Fountain of Unaging is in that ruin, and the corpse that produced such loud breathing is the keeper. Katlia mentioned the common theories on the future, but it didn't mean that it was hers. Fountain of Unaging, one of the 6 major treasures at sea. Alger was tempted by what he heard, as he considered the possibility of exploring those ruins after reaching Sequence 5. Audrey finished listening attentively, as she shook her head slightly. I don't believe that the decisive meaning behind those words in blood mean that the Fountain of Unaging is in those ruins. After a second's pause, she attempted to analyze the deceased's state of mind. A person who's about to die after being attacked by monsters wouldn't point out matters regarding the treasure. If he wishes to warn companions or relatives who come looking for him, then he should have written that it's dangerous here, or speak about the source of the danger. If he plans to tell passing ships that the Fountain of Unaging is there, then he lacks the motivation to do so for a living creature at death's doorstep. Unless a conspiracy is hidden in this matter. The conspiracy of enticing people to enter the ruin, to seek out the Fountain of Unaging, might be how he can be rescued. Yes, if I were in his shoes, I wouldn't think of desperately telling others that there's treasure here. What's in it for me? Emlyn echoed. Only hatred, bone-deep hatred, will make me write something like that on the brink of death. Otherwise, I'd rather tell others how I should be buried, or what kind of burial items I want. He'd sked and shook his head. Klein nodded indiscernibly. Controlling the world, he said hoarsely. The Fountain of Unaging is a scam. He used absolutely certain words without any additional words that would signify other possibilities. The Fountain of Unaging is a scam. Katlia looked at the world before retracting her gaze in thought. It seemed to corroborate with certain theories and guesses she had. Alger frowned. Not that he didn't agree with the world's judgment, or that he believed that Miss Justice's and Mr. Moon's explanations were devoid of reason. Instead, he realized that he had completely failed to consider this possibility. To him, this was a mistake he shouldn't have committed. After all these years, I'm still being temporarily blinded by immense profit. He fell silent for a few seconds and sighed. After exchanging what everyone had seen and heard recently, everyone began to teach little son ancient Hermes, and they learned some mysticism from each other. Time quickly passed as the fool Klein surveyed the area after everyone came to a stop. Let's end it here for today. By your will. Audrey stood up immediately and curtsied with her illusory dress. The rest of the members said the same, almost at the same time. As he watched the blurry figures vanish before his eyes, Klein wasn't in a rush to leave. He conjured a goat skin and fountain pen and wrote down the divination statement. The hope for my advancement to sequence 4. Putting down the fountain pen, Klein held the goat skin and leaned back. As he closed his eyes, he entered a cogitation state and began silently reciting the divination statement. After chanting it 7 times, he quickly fell asleep and entered the dream world. The gray, blurry sky cracked open as he saw a towering mountain tear through the clouds. At the mountaintop, there was a collapsed palace whose walls were covered with weeds and moss as they showed obvious holes. Inside the palace's hall was a huge throne carved out of stone. It was adorned with dull gemstones and gold. It was mostly mottled and damaged. It looked as though it wasn't prepared for a human, as countless translucent maggots were bunched densely together. They squirmed slowly as they kept growing. Around the throne was a raving that seemed to penetrate the long rivers of time and history. It was illusory, ethereal, and constantly echoing. Hornacis. Phlegria. Hornacis. Phlegria. Hornacis. Phlegria. The moment the ravings entered his ear, Klein jolted awake before he frowned. It really is the main peak of the Hornacis mountain range. Furthermore, I can see and hear it more clearly than before. This made him recall Queen Mystic Bernadette's prophetic words. Your fate lies on the main peak of the Hornacis mountain range. Is that my fate? It really makes me want to be rebellious and not go. Sigh, I can't deal with absolutes. It depends. Klein sighed and conjured the 5 bounty notices provided by Emlyn White. Combining the information he had, he used the methods of divination to find the locations of the primordial moon believers. Finally, due to his lack of information, he could only confirm 2 points. Gallus Kevin, Windsor Bearing, and Argos are all in Backland. Dandy and Lara are at Inmat Harbor and Pritz Harbor respectively. This is as good as nothing. Klein shook his head and returned to the real world. Recalling how he had already agreed to provide Little Son with the notary potion formula within 3 days, he wore his coat and a top hat, and he prepared to head out to find a target. When he opened the door and came to the stairwell, he saw Anderson Hood walking up, twirling his deer hunting cap with his hand while humming a folk song. This fellow is really good at recovering from setbacks. He was just taught a lesson by a demigod in the morning, and was forced to apologize and agree to a request. But I don't see any sign of trauma from him anymore. It's no wonder he became a Sequence 5 powerhouse. Just this state of mind alone makes it difficult for him to lose control. Klein looked at him, nodding slightly as a greeting. Good afternoon, Gehrman. Anderson chuckled as he waved his hand. I've received the bounty and characteristic money. I'll pay you the rest now. As he spoke, he took out stacks of cash of different thickness from different pockets. It happened pretty smoothly, I see, Klein commented without much emotions involved. Anderson immediately laughed. That's right. It happened far smoother than I imagined. Those fellows who should have rocks for brains were surprisingly friendly, polite, and efficient. I even suspect whether I've become a blessed of Lady Luck. There's no such deity. Klein ruthlessly shattered his fantasies. Why so serious? It's life. Relax a little. Relax a little. Anderson handed over the remaining £1,200. Actually, I'm very clear about what happened. That gentleman doesn't want me to waste my time, so he secretly exhorted those people. Klein glanced at the cash, pressed down on it, and asked in passing, "Have you confirmed which pirates gave you the problem?" He was asking about the prey that resulted in the manipulator's involvement. "There's no way for confirmation," Anderson said with a bitter smile. "Do you think I didn't confirm it ahead of time? Although I appear nonchalant in front of you, I will investigate the prey's background and situation ahead of time to avoid provoking someone I can't afford to. Who knows? Sigh, I can only blame it on my bad luck. This fellow is more careful than I thought." That's right, his previous sequence was called Conspirer. Klein thought in enlightenment before asking indifferently, "Who deserves death the most in this area?" Anderson was taken aback before he chuckled. "Does our craziest adventurer plan on beginning his hunting activities? However, you have to consider it well. I do not wish for you to be my partner when completing the demigod's mission. Don't worry, we're different. I'm a seer. I have all kinds of means to hide my tracks. I will not allow someone to come knocking at my door. Besides, that's a demigod of the spectator pathway. He's not good at divination or prophecies." Klein maintained his cold attitude that was unique to Gehrman and said, "You don't have to bother." Anderson immediately gave a thumbs up. "Your craziness is worthy of praise." He thought for a moment and added, "The person who deserves death the most is Malsona from the Lone's new party. He's one of the pirate's best friends. He has in his control some kind of plant that's similar to cannabis, which is highly addictive. This helps him control many people in the Toscarter government and the police department. He's one of the most powerful mob bosses over here. He has committed many crimes, killed plenty of people, and basically did it with the help of pirates. On the surface, there's no apparent problem. Haha, he isn't a beyonder, but the difficulty in killing him is how troublesome it is. Yes, troublesome. He has 3 to 5 beyonders from different pirate crews, providing him with protection. On the rooftops, outside the building, beneath the windows, everyone there belongs to him. To finish him off, the only way is to forcefully storm in and kill a large number of people. I have the means to do it, but it's too troublesome. There's also a certain level of danger. You'll become a wanted criminal after that. So I didn't deal with him, and only dealt with his safe at home." Safe. To talk about banditry in such a fresh way. Yes, I previously heard that Toscarter's main industries are its plantation economy and pirates' black market trading. It also has flourishing bar, brothel and gambling industries. I never expected that it includes new age drugs. Malsona is an ordinary person, and not a beyonder. Perfect, creeping hunger happens to lack food. Klein nodded, and indicated for Anderson to go deeper into detail. Evening in the Oak Tree Bar. A boxing match was about to unfold in the boxing ring. Many alcoholics surrounded it with mugs in hand. They were like sharks who have caught the scent of blood. As they placed their bets, they loudly yelled words such as "kill him." This was a business of the head of the Lone's new party, Malsona. The unique thing about the boxing matches held here was that death was permitted. Malsona greatly enjoyed matches that resembled ancient wrestling competitions. He often came to watch a few matches. At that moment, he was seated on the second story, overlooking the ring. Around him were several bodyguards. They were watching every direction, and among them were no lack of beyonders sent from the pirates he worked with, as well as experienced adventurers he hired with large sums of money. These people either had their backs or sides facing Malsona as they surrounded him, and they prevented anyone from approaching him. Revolvers, rifles, and hunting rifles were all aimed outside to leave the masses intimidated. After confirming the situation, Klein pressed down on his top hat, entered the bar, and saw Malsona sucking on a cigar. This mob boss had a very discernible face. Be it his brandy nose or thin brows, they were all very unique. Klein retracted his gaze, and first went to the bar to get a cup of local malt beer worth 4 pence. Then, he made his way to the railing beneath the second floor. Although he wasn't directly under Malsona, as it was heavily guarded, he was already not very far from him. "I'm within 5 meters," Klein silently muttered to himself, raised his cup of beer, and looked at the boxing ring. Chapter 683. So you are here as well. Black spirit body threads that stemmed from different lifeforms appeared in Klein's vision. But he didn't immediately extend his spirituality to attempt to control them. After distinguishing and confirming which spirit body threads belonged to Malsona, he gulped a mouthful of malt beer as he began to focus on the boxing match in the ring, just like a real member of the audience. The two boxers had their tops bare and didn't wear any protective gear. They fought all out, constantly clashing with each other as fist met flesh, and the situation quickly escalated to a fervor. Many of the alcoholic gamblers had adrenaline pumping through them as they shouted for the boxer they supported passionately, yelling, "Kill him! Finish that son of a bitch!" On the second floor, Malsona also forgot the cigar in his hand as he was fixated on the ring below, his hands clenched tightly into fists. Apart from those who had to have their backs facing him, because they were keeping tabs on any suspicious people, or watching the important regions, such as the rooftop or area beneath, the people around him couldn't help but have their eyes peeled to the intense boxing match. Klein raised his hand again, gulping a mouthful of beer, as though he was out of breath from the tense atmosphere. At this moment, his spirituality silently extended and grabbed onto the illusory black threads corresponding to Malsona. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The brandy-nosed Malsona was just about to pump his fist a little, as though he was in the ring himself, when he suddenly found his brain go numb. He felt the surroundings abruptly turn odd, as though several panes of glass were in between him and them. Malsona immediately discovered that his thoughts had clearly slowed down, as though all the parts in his brain had suddenly rusted. As the target was only an ordinary person, whose spirit body was far inferior to that of a beyonder, Klein took less than 20 seconds to achieve initial control over him. 7 seconds. All it took was 7 seconds. Oh no. Something wrong is happening. It's likely a beyonder, with relatively special powers. Malsona, who often interacted with pirates, was no stranger to the mysterious world. It was why he spent large sums of money to hire beyonders to protect himself. If he hadn't long destroyed his body with sex and alcohol, making his psyche relatively weak and his condition terrible, giving him a high chance of losing control if he were to consume a potion, he would have also wished to obtain supernatural powers himself. At that moment, as his thoughts were slowing down, and due to his lack of experience, Malsona spent more than 10 seconds to figure out that he was under assault. He immediately reached out his arm and opened his mouth in an attempt to shout for help. However, his actions were extremely slow, and his voice was weak. With a number of his bodyguards around him engrossed in the exciting and nerve-wracking boxing match, and the audiences roaring in an ever-increasing crescendo, as well as all the guards along the perimeter putting their attention on any possible attack locations to protect their employer, his obvious abnormality ended up being neglected. When the climax of the match received a temporary respite, a number of bodyguards and subordinates turned to look back at their boss, and they saw that his eyes appeared somewhat in a daze. His hands didn't seem to be in the right place, as if he was still caught up in the match, anxiously awaiting the final results. The corners of the mob boss's eyes had tears welling up as he tried hard to release his fingers to drop the cigar to attract the attention of his subordinates. But he discovered in despair that his line of thought was becoming highly impeded and stiff. Even a simple action needed more than a minute to complete, and his fingers were even resisting his will. Pa! The burning cigar finally fell to the ground as Malsona's tears flowed down to his neck across his cheeks. A few bodyguards discovered this, and were just about to ask their boss if it was because the match was too exciting when Malsona suddenly bent down. As he wiped his face, he picked up the cigar. That was an excellent match. Give the victor more money. Malsona flicked the cigar and pulled up his collar as he grinned happily. He didn't say exactly how much was to be given, as Klein didn't know the market rates. All he could do was give a vague comment. Yes, Malsona of the Lone's new party had already become his marionette. As this mob boss was only an ordinary person, and his spirit body was even weaker than most healthy humans, All it took was 2 minutes and 15 seconds. If the time needed was any longer, he would have had to divert his attention to create an illusion to create some chaos, making the bodyguards place their attention on protecting Malsona and not being able to discover his abnormality in time. "Kill him! Kill him!" The shouts of the audience suddenly turned uniform as the match in the ring came to its end. Malsona also allowed his bodyguards to continue watching the match. When a boxer collapsed to the ground unconscious, Malsona took a swig of his cigar and said, "To the lounge. I want to take a break." "Yes, boss." His bodyguards and subordinates immediately surrounded him, escorted him to the corridor on the second floor, and helped him open the door to the lounge. After instructing his guards to guard different critical spots and to not disturb him, Malsona paced around and opened a safe. He found documents involving all kinds of new drugs and selected the most important ones. Following that, he placed the documents and an address he cut from the newspapers, as well as a total of £758 in cash into a briefcase. With a creak, he opened the door and called for a subordinate. "Throw this bag under the 3rd Street lamp around the alley." "Yes, boss." The subordinate didn't inquire why. This was a rule. After closing the door again, Malsona found 3 candles and items with spirituality and used a pen and paper to carefully draw the corresponding symbol of the fool, a half-pupil-less eye which represented secrecy, and the contorted lines which represented change. Then, this mob boss who had become a marionette lit the candles, used cologne to represent essential oil and extract, and solemnly held a bestowment ritual. He softly chanted the fool's honorific name, and he used ancient Hermes, which he originally didn't know, to recite the corresponding incantation. Following that, he picked up the item with spirituality and let it fuse into the wind, constructing an illusory door with the transformed candlelight. If he couldn't find any items with spirituality, Klein had planned on using Malsona's blood. A human's blood was an item with spirituality to begin with. In the washroom on the 1st floor, Klein took this opportunity by taking 4 steps counterclockwise and going above the gray fog. He didn't use the Black Emperor card, and instead, he directly stirred some of the powers of the mysterious space, combining it with the paper figurine before throwing it through the bestowment door. The pitch blackness immediately transformed into an angel with 12 pairs of wings. It flew through the illusory and mysterious door, passing through the pitch-black depths of the void and arriving where Malsona was. This was to disrupt any subsequent investigations via divination, prophecy, or other beyonder powers. Right on the heels of that, Klein picked up Creeping Hunger and threw it into the ritual's door. Creeping Hunger arrived in the real world thanks to the bestowment ritual, and it arrived in front of Malsona. Having not eaten for a long time, it immediately became restless. At this moment, Klein, who had returned to the washroom, controlled the frozen Malsona from a distance of dozens of meters away to immediately close his mouth and pick up the glove on the altar. A crack opened in the middle of the glove as 2 rows of illusory, white, and eerie teeth were revealed. The senses of the marionette he obtained quickly weakened as he decisively severed his control. The slight backlash made his mind spin, but it didn't take long for him to recover. Then, as though nothing had happened, he left the washroom, returned to the bar counter, and continued drinking the malt beer he didn't finish earlier. At the same time, he found a rat on the 2nd floor through the use of spirit body threads, and he made it become his marionette in less than 2 minutes. The rat began searching for a tunnel and path with rather awkward and unfamiliar motions, and it took quite some time before entering Malsona's lounge through a hole hidden by a bookshelf. At this moment, a thin glove that resembled human skin lay silently on the ground, as there was nothing left behind of Malsona, not even his clothes. The rat climbed up to the table and bit on the paper with the symbol corresponding to the fool, placing it close to the burning candle. The paper quickly ignited and burned to ashes. After extinguishing the 3 candles and returning them to their original locations, the rat came beside Creeping Hunger and bit onto it. Then it returned via its original path and left Malsona's lounge. It stealthily ran all the way to the balcony, facing the outside on the 2nd story, and it silently climbed down. On the first story where the bar counter was, Klein finished drinking his last mouthful of beer, put down the cup, and slowly stood up. He pressed down on his half-top hat, stuffed his hands into the black double-breasted frock coat, and walked past the alcoholics and gamblers without any haste and came to the streets. Following the light of the street lamps, he entered the alley at a normal pace. While pulling out a paper figurine and lighting it with a flick, he picked up the briefcase thrown under the 3rd Street lamp. At this moment, a gray rat came with a thin human-skin glove in its mouth out of the shadows. Klein bent his back with a deadpan expression once again and picked up Creeping Hunger. Then, the gray rat left on its own, climbing into a rubbish chute and lying there until it lost its breath. With night about to fall, the street lamp illuminated Klein as he stood there, spreading his fingers in an unhurried manner while wearing Creeping Hunger on his left hand. After stretching his finger joints and getting used to the glove, he carried the briefcase and followed the still vibrant and lively oak tree bar before vanishing at the crossroads. He took out the address slip and stamps from the briefcase and left only with the important documents, pasting them onto it. Then, he placed it in a mailbox on the corner of the street. Finally, Klein changed back into Gehrman Sparrow, took a rental carriage, and headed for another bar around the pier. It was a bar provided by Anderson that had relatively more pirates. Upon entering the bar, Klein swept his gaze and took in the interior. Suddenly, he saw a familiar figure. The figure had a medium-sized build, and his lips were purple. His brown eyes hid an intense maleficence that left one afraid. He was none other than the second mate of the King of Immortality Agolito, Slaughter Curtius, with a bounty of 9,500 pounds. Clearly, after escaping via the exit of the dangerous waters, the death announcer had arrived in the nearby Toscarter Island in search of replenishments. So you are here as well. The corners of Klein's mouth curled up slightly, discovering in a chance encounter the devil, who couldn't be more suitable for hunting. Just as he generated that ill intent, Curtius sensed him and turned his head to the entrance of the bar. Klein didn't hesitate to grab a beer on the table beside him and threw it over. Right on the heels of that, he drew his revolver and coldly aimed. Bang! Chapter 684, Battle Encounter Kacha. Curtius only half turned his body as the cup of beer hit the round table beside him, smashing to pieces. Amidst the gunfire, he didn't attempt to dodge, as though he had instinctively seen through the illusion. It was as though he had a spring installed in him, as he bounced to the forefront amongst the gamblers and alcoholics who were crouched down or scattered. His gaze was locked onto the cold adventurer, wearing a suit by the door. Gehrman Sparrow. Curtius's pupils constricted as he opened his mouth and chanted the language of foulness that stemmed from the abyss. At this moment, Klein truly pulled the trigger as a pale golden bullet that appeared to be scooped out of boiling hot water shot out, going straight for the slaughterer, who had a bounty of 9,500 pounds. However, all Curtius did was gently lift his right hand and spread his fingers to produce a light blue flame in his palm. Then he grabbed the bullet in an unimaginable manner. The bullet entered a cage, as the light blue flames solidified. Following that, the bullet emitted sunlight, just enough of it to neutralize everything. Two figures stood up beside Curtius. One of them was a short-haired woman wielding dual pistols, and the other was a boorish man in boxing gloves. Clearly, Curtius didn't come to Toscarter's pier in search for supplies alone. Or it should be said that he definitely had partners he knew here. 3 Beyonders. Curtius might even be a Sequence 5. At that moment, Klein nearly blurted out something along the lines of "Sorry, my bad." One couldn't make any preparations when attacking a devil, relying on complete chance. Furthermore, there couldn't be any hesitation. Otherwise, the devil would immediately detect the ill intent and danger. However, under such situations, it was truly hard to tell who held the advantage in such situations. Klein didn't hesitate to turn around while holding his revolver. Then, he agilely dashed for the staircase leading to the bar's second story amidst the crowd and above the crouching alcoholics. Just as he dashed in, A light blue fireball smashed into the side of the staircase before instantly exploding. Boom! A tiny part of the bottom of the staircase collapsed as the bar began to tremble. The strong smell of sulfur spread. Curtius and his two companions didn't delay, as they jumped across the first few steps of the staircase in fervent pursuit of Gehrman Sparrow. Tap, tap, tap. Klein ran for the second story. And midway, he quickly began his examination of the corresponding spirit-body threads. This allowed him to easily find an empty room without any humans. He turned around, took a step, and was about to enter the door before jumping off the window to escape from the bar. At that moment, Curtius and his two companions chased up to the second story, and upon seeing this scene, they tacitly split up. The former continued the pursuit, while the latter entered the rooms on the same side in a bid to head down to intercept Gehrman. And Klein was waiting precisely for this opportunity. He suddenly half-turned his body as his left black-gloved hand grabbed at the air. The woman with the dual pistols and the man in boxing gloves continued their actions without detecting any abnormalities. They rushed into the other rooms, jumped off the windows, and went far away without returning. Their goal and actions of separate and intercept had allowed Klein to use the Baron of Corruption's distortion to change it to separate and take action alone. This wouldn't last very long, but it was enough time for Klein to fight Curtius one-on-one for a brief moment. Boom! Having completed distortion, he fell to the ground, rolling inside the building and avoiding the light blue fireball, which Curtius kept shooting out. Amidst the incessant booming, the buildings where the bar originally was wavered, as though it had experienced an earthquake. Right on the heels of that, Curtius rapidly lunged forward, entering the rather vast room. Seeing Gehrman Sparrow adeptly somersaulting and jumping without fighting him head-on, while also controlling his emotions very well, Slaughterer immediately opened his mouth and used the unique language of foulness to say the word, "Slow." The entire room, and all the objects inside seemed to calm down. Klein's somersaulting actions slowed down significantly and weren't as smooth as before. Curtius didn't hesitate to lock onto his target, as he followed up with another word of the devil language. Die! Klein's figure instantly froze as he stood rooted on the spot and gradually turned faint and thin, becoming a paper figurine filled with spotted red rust. At the same time, he surfaced by the side of the door, wearing a half-top hat and black double-breasted frock suit. He reached out his black-gloved hand, grabbed the handle, and shut the door to the collapsing room with a pull. Creak! The din outside vanished as the room seemed to stand out alone, becoming a firm cage. Upon seeing this, Curtius's body swelled as his clothes tore. He instantly transformed into a behemoth nearly 3 meters tall. His skin appeared dark, but it was dark black and sinister. Goat horns filled with countless mysterious patterns grew on his head as a pair of bat wings on his back spread open. Swirling around him were light blue flames that emitted the strong smell of sulfur. So. Light blue fireballs shot out in unison, blanketing the region around the door. At the same time, the redness in Curtius's eyes bloomed as he said with the extremely corruptive words of the devil, "Corruption." This was also an area of effect attack. The light blue in his eyes filled up as Klein clenched his left hand, which wore a sinister and noble glove, and quickly did a half-twist. The fireballs immediately lost their trajectories and acted chaotically, as though in random motion. They smashed into the ceiling, the door ground, or flew backward at Curtius. Immediately, the booming sounds in the room undulated. The seal created by the power of distortion suffered an intense blow as it trembled, but it didn't show any signs of damage. The light blue flames soared into the sky as the smell of sulfur spread. Klein's body suddenly bent down as his body was covered in a layer of clearly sticky black liquid. Bang! His figure exploded, turning into torn pieces of paper and corrupted black fog. Immediately following that, he surfaced on the other side, his skin a clear dark shade. His clothes were torn from the explosive force and the flames from the abyss. Corruption, which had splashed damage, was useful against his paper figurine substitutes to a certain extent, inflicting damage to a certain degree via an unavoidable influence. and the aftermath of the explosion wasn't within Klein's control. Similarly, it dealt damage to him. However, upon their first encounter, Klein had given Curtius a cup of beer, completing the bribe. Therefore, attacks and control effects directed at him were greatly negated. Curtius clearly didn't expect the minor influence that corruption had dealt to Gehrman Sparrow. Just as he pulled out a long blade formed entirely of flames, and before he could unleash his speed and strength in a fervent attack, he saw his opponent's left hand's glove transform, as though it was made of gold. 2 blinding streaks of lightning tore out of Klein's eyes. Psychic piercing. Ah! Curtius instantly let out a tragic cry as he felt as though 100 bottles of holy water had been infused into his mind. He was rich in actual combat experience, and, knowing that having been struck by a psyche attack, knew that he would subsequently suffer a series of relentlessness attacks. Hence, he instinctively transformed into a pitch-black liquid and began spreading across the floor. The liquid appeared to be the coalescence of the darkest and evilest desires of a person's heart, as the liquid spread across the room towards Gehrman Sparrow, as though it would corrupt everything. This state is truly perfect. In a battle encounter, either party would suffer the problem of not being sufficiently prepared. Thankfully, I've always remembered the suspected desire apostle I encountered, and I've completely held back all desires and emotions. Klein didn't dodge as the glove on his left hand rapidly bloomed with pure and clean sunlight. He spread out his arms, allowing a pillar of holy light that had golden flames swirling around it descend from the sky. It illuminated every corner and every shadow of the room. The column of light struck the richest parts of the pitch-black liquid, as it radiated outwards in a rippling manner. Amidst the bright and holy light, the pitch-black liquid quickly evaporated and mostly vanished. Curtius hurriedly materialized his body and reformed near the window. He still maintained his state as a 3-meter-tall devil. He was as calm as always, but he could hardly hold back his intense bloodlust and desire to kill. The present him was already rather weak. He didn't dare to circle around Gehrman Sparrow, as he waited for him to show any emotion, so as to control his desires. He ignited the 2 mysterious goat horns on his head in an attempt to forcefully attack his enemy's psyche, inducing emotions to a certain degree in an unavoidable manner. Once he had any desires or emotions, the situation would be in the desire apostle's control. At that moment, Curtius's head suddenly turned numb, causing him to nearly lose the thoughts he previously had. After both parties entered a range of 5 meters, the reason why Klein remained in a passive state, using paper figurine substitutes and a baron of corruption's distortion powers to barely put up a fight and stall for time, was to divert attention in order to control Curtius's spirit-body threads. With the strength of a Sequence 5 spirit body, it wasn't easy to obtain initial control over Slaughterer to begin with. However, with the cup of beer bribe, it reduced Curtius's defense and resistance. And after that, this desire apostle suffered a psychic piercing and was thoroughly purified once by light of purification. As a result, he had become rather weak. Therefore, even though Klein was using his other powers, he still took 15 seconds to obtain initial control over Curtius. The intense battle in the room instantly turned quiet. Although Curtius's thoughts had turned slow, he still had the ability to complete certain actions. He could still forcefully resist the control that stemmed from the depths of his spirit body. The bloodshot colors in his eyes converged as his eyes reflected Gehrman Sparrow's figure. The curled goat horns on his head began to burn intensely as hatred, greed, lust, wrath, and other emotions and desires began to spread outwards in a corporeal manner. Klein entered a half-cogitation state as he calmly focused on deepening his control, hoping to quickly make Curtius lose all means of resistance. Chapter 685. From a delay to disconnection in the room that had been reduced to shambles, Klein, whose top hat had fallen to the side and clothes had become tattered, was about 4 meters away from Curtius, who was a behemoth with bat wings. The situation was so quiet, as though a puppet show was being played. In fact, Klein still had the means to do something else. Back when marionettist Rosago forcefully controlled both him and Sharon, he could resist the wraith's possession and use flame controlling to summon a flame to destroy the shadow pulled in by Sharon. If he hadn't made a serious mistake by targeting the Sequence 5 Wraith, Rosago could have diverted his attention to killing Klein, snuffing out any chance of him, using the language of foulness charm. Now, although Klein was definitely inferior to him, there was also only one enemy. Of course, there wasn't really much he could do. Under the premise of not losing control over Curtius, he could move, but he couldn't do it too hastily or quickly. He could use Beyonder powers which didn't expend too much of his spirituality, but he couldn't divert his attention to power the mystical items he carried, or use actions that required too much movement like drawing a gun. And when a target was controlled to a certain extent, several attacks could nudge or stimulate the target, allowing them to resist the control of their spirit body threads to a greater extent, and even show signs of escaping from his control. Therefore, Klein had to wait. At that moment, his heart rate suddenly sped up as an uncontrollable sense of horror and anxiety surfaced in his mind. He couldn't help but suspect that Curtius's companions, who had their intentions affected by distortion, were about to return. No good. My emotions have been stirred. Klein was first taken aback, as he tried to use cogitation to forcefully calm his agitated heart. Haha, he has emotional stirrings. A chance. Curtius was delighted as a slow thought flashed through his mind. Then, using his Beyonder powers, he attempted to magnify Gehrman Sparrow's horror and anxiety, planting an emotional seed in him. As long as he succeeded, all he needed was to completely trigger it, maiming his opponent, making him unable to influence him further. No. How can it be ineffective? His emotional stirrings have disappeared. Curtius's bloodshot eyes constricted slowly, as it was gradually filled with shock, alarm, and anger. Klein, who imagined that he had given the Desire Apostle a chance to counterattack, discovered that nothing had happened after completely calming himself down. The curled goat horns on Curtius's head were ignited, but he didn't attempt to use his emotional stirrings. Moments after having this thought, Klein roughly understood the situation. It wasn't that Curtius didn't wish to control his horror and anxiety, but it was that he had failed. From the moment he sensed the emotional stirrings, he had to take a few seconds to digest the situation, before using 2 to 3 seconds to make the decision. Finally, he spent even more time to organize his thoughts before channeling the corresponding Beyonder powers. All of that took him at least 10 seconds to complete. Klein only took a total of 3 to 4 seconds to calm his mind after detecting the problem. Therefore, Curtius's Beyonder powers naturally failed to be effective against an enemy who was in normal condition. To put it simply, the delay was too long. Under such situations, don't try to fiddle around with highly intricate matters. Klein lampooned before suppressing his sense of schadenfreude. After another 10 seconds, Curtius finally understood the source of the problem. He no longer considered targeting desires and emotions, and instead, while flapping the bat wings on his back with great difficulty, he relied on a devil's powerful body and spirit body to resist the control stemming from the spirit body threads. He tried to make the swirling light blue flames slowly coagulate into a fireball. Klein could almost foresee fireballs bombard him. Hence, he didn't hesitate to split off some of his spirituality, snapping his fingers using his right thumb and middle finger. Pa! The light blue flames suddenly soared before they truly took form and collapsed completely. They were like fireworks blooming behind Curtius. Magician's flame controlling. Curtius continued struggling, but his actions became even slower as he resembled a rusting puppet. As for Klein, he casually moved his feet to dodge the devil language Curtius had launched with all his strength. 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Klein suddenly stopped as his eyes locked onto Curtius's head, which had lost its curved goat horns. At that moment, he still needed 2.5 minutes from controlling this Desire Apostle to turn him into his marionette. But Klein didn't have such plans. He never had such plans in the first place. It took too much time, allowing Curtius's companions to rush back in time. Klein only had one ultimate goal. It was to control Curtius to a certain extent, so that attacks within a certain limit wouldn't help him escape his predicament. The bloodshot eyes, grimacing expression, and sharp teeth with drooling saliva reflected in Klein's eyes. He opened his mouth and said a word. Bang! Air bullet. An air bullet of a sequence 5. This was already comparable to a bullet shot from a steam rifle. Bang! The air bullet accurately hit Curtius's forehead, causing him to throw up his head, yanking the spirit body threads. In between his brows, a bloody hole that wasn't too deep had appeared. It wasn't a mortal blow. To a devil, a desire apostle, their bodies seemed to be cloaked with thick and hard armor. Their blood and flesh had extreme elasticity and defensive strength. Bam! 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 Klein kept creating air bullets while making gunshot sounds, striking Curtius's forehead, again and again, slowly leaving it a contiguous mess. At the same time, he stably controlled the spirit body threads to prevent him from using the feedback to weaken his influence. Curtius let out an angry stuttering roar as he tried moving forward in a bid to counterattack. But Klein was a lot more agile than him, and his plans to liquefy undoubtedly failed because of the control of the spirit body threads. Bang! Another air bullet struck Curtius, completely shattering his forehead, penetrating his brain. Bang! 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 The subsequent bullets flew in, one bullet after another. Bang! Curtius's skull was finally sent flying as black crevices filled his brain. At that moment it was a complete mess. The aura of the slaughterer worth 9,500 pounds quickly dissipated. But he didn't close his eyes, as he had already lost them. Bit by bit, he collapsed to the ground slowly as Klein walked over and extended his left hand. Two blood-red eyes split open in the middle of the glove. A cold and eerie wind appeared as Slaughterer Curtius's spirit body, as well as his black fog-like beyonder characteristic shot towards creeping hunger amidst screams before fixing itself to a blank finger. Soon, the glove turned black once again. But this time it was profound and pure, resembling countless squirming dots of the same color formed one layer after another. Klein sensed the changes for 2 seconds before walking towards the shattered window, feeling somewhat disappointed, and also somewhat delighted. When grazing Curtius, he had actually considered which beyonder powers he wished to receive, and which he didn't wish to receive. The one he didn't wish for was the danger premonition of a devil, as this needed to have creeping hunger constantly activated while maintaining Curtius's soul. And this meant that he needed to feed the glove every day, which spelled an extreme inconvenience for himself. Furthermore, this also overlapped with his powers as a seer to a certain extent. As for whether the danger premonition of a devil worked after making it into his marionette, Klein believed that it was targeted on the marionette and had nothing to do with its controller. What Klein wished for the most was to draw the desire apostle's beyonder powers of using a target's emotional stirrings, or the use of any of the language of foulness, with the best being death or corruption. At that moment, he had been quite lucky to obtain 3 beyonder powers. One of them was language of foulness, but it wasn't death or corruption, but slow. This allowed all targets in a 7 to 8 meter radius to instantly turn numb, or even come to a halt. However, it could only be maintained for 2 seconds. The second beyonder power was Sword of Lava. It could create a flaming sword with extremely high offensive power. One strike could directly cleave through a thick stone column, leaving the sliced-off end to appear to be melted off. This was the option Curtius had used when he attacked maniacally. The third was Sulfur Fireball. Not only could it create an explosion of considerable might, but it could also poison people and objects which had been stained by the flames. If matched with the Devil Form's powers, 10 to 20 fireballs could be launched at the same instance. Out of that form it maxed out at 3. That's not bad. The damage delivered by Sword of Lava to non-undead, or non-corrupt creatures, is clearly higher than the Priest of Light's Light of Holiness. Klein came to the window, and happened to see the backs of Curtius's companions opening up a distance from him. They haven't shaken off the influence? No, with so much time having passed, they must have shaken off the influence, and returned somewhere nearby. Now they're escaping? They sense Curtius's death? That's a little weird. Klein turned his head back, and saw Curtius's corpse still in his devil form. His form didn't change back into a human as a result of his death. He looked at the corpse for 2 seconds before coming up with a theory. Powers like the devil form are a state that brings a body close to the state of losing control. However, they still have their reasoning and can change back while they're in control. Otherwise, they will maintain their forms. Klein didn't delay as he searched the devil's corpse. He discovered that Curtius's gigantification had torn all his clothes and pants, causing his wallet and cash to scatter across the ground. Later, they were all destroyed due to the blanketing attack from the fireballs and sulfurous flames. Just as Klein looked away, he suddenly discovered something twinkling in the giant devil's chest. It was a thin and long crystal formed purely of blood. A faint smell of sulfur emanated around it. "What's that?" Klein frowned, unable to figure out an answer. Curtius's beyonder characteristics has clearly entered creeping hunger. Why would his corpse produce something strange? A question flashed across Klein's mind. Furthermore, as the second mate of the King of Immortality, Curtius didn't even carry a mystical item or sealed artifact. This had exceeded his expectations. Chapter 686. A hard-to-complete ritual. After thinking for a moment, Klein, who didn't have an answer, put away the thin blood crystal when he didn't sense any danger from it. Then, he bent down to inspect Curtius's devil form, which had lost half its head. "I wonder if I can still use this to exchange for a bounty, and if so, how much can I get? I have no idea who I can contact from the military over here. Send us Kent a telegram?" This back and forth, together with the work he has to do remotely, it's hard to tell if it will finish in 3 to 4 days. "I'll be leaving tomorrow. Also, I can't forget the middleman's cut." He mumbled, walked to the side, and picked up the clearly charred half-top hat and wore it. Then, he dragged the heavy and massive devil's corpse and walked to the door before reaching out to open the door. A howling wind blew in, breaking the silence in the room. Klein tapped his finger joint to deactivate the spirit-body thread's vision as he continued dragging the nasty and terrifying devil's corpse across the corridor, down the stairs to the first floor. At that moment, there weren't many people left in the bar. Tables and chairs were overturned, and there were shards everywhere. It was a mess. Klein went past the heavily damaged staircase and into the main hall. He surveyed the area and found the forlorn bar owner behind the bar counter. Few of the bouncers he hired had remained. Most had scattered off. Tap, tap, tap. Klein walked over one step at a time with the devil corpse behind him bumping into the furniture. What are you planning to do?" The owner took a step back as he yelled at the top of his lungs. His bouncers gathered over, shuddering in fear. Their eyes were darting around as their bodies revealed their own inclinations. It appeared as though they would immediately flee the moment any incident happened. Klein stopped in his tracks, throwing Curtius's corpse in front of him. Then he said in a deep voice, "Can you claim bounty rewards?" The owner was stunned for a second as he instinctively moved his gaze down, before seeing the huge devil's corpse, which still had some blue flames lingering around it. He and his bouncers drew a cold gasp at the same time, many of them feeling surreal. This was a real devil. Apart from its lack of curled goat horns, it looked identical to the devils described in the church's Bibles or mythical stories. To ordinary people living in the pirates' playground, it wasn't rare to witness supernatural powers. Here, their horizons were clearly broader than the colonies of Oravi and the civilians of the kingdom's native soil. However, as the owner and bouncers of a bar, they had never seen real devils before. They even suspected that it was an attempt by the church to tarnish unofficial beyonders. The owner retracted his gaze with great difficulty as he looked at the stoic adventurer in tattered clothes. "I can. They should have the means to determine that this is Curtius. It's Curtius, right?" Klein silently heaved a sigh of relief and silently nodded. The owner hesitated for 2 seconds and forced a fearful smile. "However, it's impossible to get everything. As you know, there will be some money spent during the process. The fees cost about 30%. Otherwise, you'll have to wait quite a while. After all, £9,500 isn't a small sum. For Toscarter's Pier, it will take at least a week. It's because there are pirates frequenting this area, and there are often adventurers here to claim bounties. Therefore, it constantly has quite a bit of cash reserves. If you were in Orvey Island or anywhere else, it might take 2 weeks or even a month. £9,500 really wasn't a small sum. Klein clearly remembered that back in Tingen City, the Nighthawks team's monthly budget was only about £1,000. The budget was even split between the church and the police department. He thought for a moment and asked the bar's boss, "Do you know me?" "Yes." The owner hurriedly nodded. Klein swept his gaze across everyone and continued asking, "Can you figure out where I'm living?" Yes. The owner didn't dare to lie. Klein tersely responded before using a flat and direct tone. "Send £6,000 to me before noon tomorrow." £6,000? That's less than 70%. That's about £600 short. The owner was taken aback, never expecting the crazy adventurer to take the initiative to lower the price. "Can you do it?" Klein asked again. The additional £650 was his compensation for the bar. After all, he had left the bar in a mess. However, this wasn't something the crazy adventurer would say himself. He believed that the bar's owner wasn't a philanthropist. There was no way he would hand over the excess to others. The owner considered it seriously before replying, "Yes." Even though the official process wouldn't be that fast, there was nothing he needed to worry about. This was because he planned on borrowing some of the money and using his savings to pay the bounty reward which Gairman Sparrow wanted. To be able to earn several £100 at once wasn't something he would miss out on. Klein nodded and didn't speak another word. He turned around and walked to the bar's entrance. When he came near, he took out a few yellow pennies and threw them onto a tiny round table that still stood standing. After some clinking sounds, the pennies spun to a stop. They numbered 8 pence. While doing this action, the black-suited Klein didn't stop walking. His figure soon disappeared from the entrance. "What's the meaning of that?" the owner said with a surprised and blank look. Most of the bouncers shook their heads with the same expression, indicating that they didn't know Gairman Sparrow's motive. Only a bouncer who had been standing guard by the door thought with a frown. Then he said uncertainty. When he first entered he took someone's cup of beer and threw it at Curtius. "This is the compensation for that cup of beer, as well as the cup?" The bar fell into silence once again. Although the owner and bouncers couldn't accept such an explanation, they had the baffling feeling that this matched the style of the crazy adventurer Gairman Sparrow. "Another set of clothes ruined. That's nearly £9. Thankfully, I made quite a lot this time." "Yes, I'll have to make another set tomorrow." After turning into another street, Klein stopped and observed himself. He wasn't in a rush to return to the hotel he stayed at. He first followed the information provided by the head honcho of the loan's new party, Malsona, and found a policeman who was controlled by drugs. The man helped the gangs commit several sordid deeds, to the point of creating a scheme to kill a witness. He channeled his spirit to confirm his crimes before allowing creeping hunger to enjoy a true feast for the day. After doing that, Klein returned to his hotel via a carriage and entered his room. After setting up the altar, he used a ritual to send creeping hunger and the thin blood crystal above the gray fog. Sitting at the end of the long bronze table, Klein didn't hesitate to pick up the glove and release the soul of the priest of light. This Sequence 5 powerhouse had a thin face and an elegant bearing. He was an amiable elder, and he wore a simple white clergyman's robe. He bowed to express his gratitude to the mysterious existence who was concealed by the gray fog. Klein gently nodded as a response. Then, he conjured pen and paper and wrote down the divination statement. The potion formulas for the sequences above the sun pathways Sequence 7. Leaning back into his seat, he began using dream divination to communicate with the spirit. The grayish world quickly changed. He saw the priest of light roll open a piece of brownish goatskin in a room filled with sunlight. On it was a formula written in ancient Fasak. Sequence 6 Notary. Main ingredients: 1 set of crystallized roots of the Tree of Elders, 5 feathers of a spirit-packed bird. Supplementary ingredients: 100 milliliters of radiant spirit-packed trees juice, 1 golden-rimmed sunflower, 1 white-rimmed sunflower, 5 drops of aqua fern juice. After the scene paused for a few seconds, ripples surfaced again, outlining an opulent hall filled with golden statues. Inside the hall, a man covered in pure light that prevented one from looking straight at him said to a half-centenarian elder, "This is the potion formula for the priest of light. Remember, dispel the darkness and praise the sun." The elder received it in excitement and spread open the ancient goatskin. Sequence 5, Priest of Light. Main ingredients: red comb of a dawn rooster, a pure white brilliance rock. Supplementary ingredients: 5 grams of rosemary, 7 drops of fingered citron juice, 10 milliliters of rock water, 60 milliliters of a king of dawn rooster's blood. Ritual: in pure darkness, bury your entire body in ice that usually doesn't melt before consuming the potion. The scene quickly vanished without any additional content. Klein wasn't surprised. He knew very well that when it involved the domain of a demigod, the 7 churches would often directly provide the potions and rituals without giving them the formula. At this moment, the Priest of Light's figure had mostly dispersed due to the forceful spirit channeling. His painful expression eased as he raised his head and spread out his arms, as though he was embracing sunlight. "Praise the sun!" The Priest of Light closed his eyes as he piously said. Those were his last words as his spirit body rapidly disintegrated and plummeted into the gray fog before completely disappearing. A pious believer, Klein sighed in comment. Following that, he recalled what he had seen in the dream and recorded the formula. The main ingredient of a notary is the root crystal of the Tree of Elders. I remember that Miss Justice's psychiatrist's potion requires the fruit of the Tree of Elders. From the looks of it, the spectator and sun pathways might be interchangeable at high sequences. The difficulty of the Priest of Light's ritual for most people is to find ice that usually doesn't melt. But it's different for Little Sunday. To bury a living person in pure darkness in the forsaken land of the gods might lead to one's disappearance. A method to avoid this has to be figured out. Dispel the darkness and praise the sun is the acting method? Klein considered for a moment before picking up the blood crystal produced by Curtius's body. After a few seconds of consideration, he wrote down the corresponding divination statement in a serious manner. Its origins. Holding up the item and the piece of paper, Klein chanted softly once more and entered a dream. In the gray, blurry world, he saw the gigantic sailboat, the Death Announcer, with its bow and stern curving up high. He saw Curtius climb up a soft ladder and arrive on the deck. Just as this Desire Apostle found his footing, a sticky black fog emanated from the deck's cracks. It was filled with a corruptive smell that enveloped Curtius within it, corrupting and tainting all the shimmering objects on him, including his body. The gas quickly contracted and entered Curtius's chest. The color gradually turned red, as though it was a bloodstain. Finally, everything was restored to normal. Curtius genuflected as he said to the deck, "Your will is my will, great Death Announcer." Following that, the scene shattered as Klein opened his eyes. He sat straight and looked at the thin and long blood crystal. In thought he silently said, "The Death Announcer is alive? A sealed artifact with living traits." This crystal is the source of its control over its crew, and it comes equipped with an intense corruptive force. Therefore, mystical items of low levels will be corrupted by it. Chapter 687. Blatherer picking up the blood crystal and smelling the faint smell of sulfur. Klein could vaguely sense the corrosive powers hidden deep within. Legend has it that the abyss is an area with the greatest powers of corruption. Even an angel will fall and lose control there. The people guarding the abyss will eventually be assimilated by the abyss. The characteristic shown by the Desire Apostle does match this point. Deepening the assimilation of a Desire Apostle? Klein allowed his thoughts to wander. Soon he noticed a detail. Curtius had declared loyalty to the Death Announcer, and not to King of Immortality Agolito. Does this mean that the real King of Immortality is the Death Announcer? Agolito is only its spokesperson, or the administrator to infect targets. Rumor has it that Agolito isn't a demigod and isn't at sequence 4. He relies solely on the Death Announcer to become one of the 4 kings. If that's the case, His actual situation is worse than I expected. He doesn't even have any autonomy. Of course, I can't eliminate the possibility that he's a sequence 4. And his relationship with the death announcer is just one of cooperating partners. He's a demon after all. He's crafty and enjoys misleading people. Klein contemplated for a few seconds before attempting another divination to see if he could obtain any revelation for the blood crystal's usage. He wasn't afraid that it would incur huge trouble for him. Or it could be said that he was already prepared to receive any. Even if it was connected to the Devil King in the Abyss, it would at most be equivalent to the backlash from the true creator, or eternal blazing Sunday. Klein believed that the gray fog had the means to defend against and suppress it. This is the first time. I won't have my location locked on, so it's not a big problem. Besides, I already divined its origins and there wasn't any danger. Therefore, the death announcer definitely isn't a sequence 0 devil. Isn't that obvious? If it's really a sequence 0 devil, or a sealed artifact at the level of King of Angels, Amon, then there's no need to avoid the joint forces of me, Queen Mystic, Admiral of Stars, and Anderson. Klein realized that he had been frightening himself. He began to seriously begin the dream divination. In the blurry world, he saw a world covered with sticky black fog. A monster formed from dark-colored lumps of flesh squirmed over as its body cavity produced a raging roar. Blatherer. The scene changed, producing an ancient-looking altar which was splashed with fresh blood. Engraved on of it were words and symbols filled with a corruptive feeling. It was as though they were shouting something. The hazy world shattered as Klein slowly opened his eyes and sat straight. He tapped his finger on the edge of the long bronze table and muttered to himself. Blatherer refers to the state before the death announcer became a sealed artifact. A blatherer from the abyss. Or was it a gigantic monster formed from dark-colored lumps of flesh that became a sealed artifact after being killed by a blatherer? Haha. Regardless, the final confirmation is that there's one ship involved. Otherwise, it wouldn't have solidified into its present state. From the laughter of the person on the brink of losing control, it's very likely that the death announcer corresponds to blatherer. A preliminary prediction is that it isn't a grade 0 sealed artifact. Otherwise, King of Immortality would be the best of the 4 kings. It's probably a sequence 3. Furthermore, Agalito clearly doesn't match well with it. The level of power shown isn't that high. It's at most sequence 4. That corruptive altar that gave off a feeling as though it was shouting suggests that the blood crystal is able to summon a high-level devil? For example, the blatherer? Having no idea how to summon a high-level devil, nor having any plans on doing so, Klein casually threw the thin blood crystal, along with the Beyonder characteristic, the glowing crystal left behind by the Priest of Light, into the junk pile. Then he perfunctorily named the former Aura of Blatherer. After doing this, Klein cautiously attempted another divination. It was to confirm if he would encounter any danger that night. Danger that came from King of Immortality Agalito. In fact, he already had a prediction for the divination's outcome. King of Immortality Agalito wouldn't touch ground on the island. Firstly, it was because Toscarter had a hidden demigod. Ordinary Beyonders might not know, but the 4 kings would have some level of understanding. And it was unlikely Agalito would wish to have any head-on conflict with other demigods. Forcefully entering the territory of another person wasn't his style. Secondly, Klein's previous theory had produced a conclusion. Agalito didn't dare to leave the death announcer, and the death announcer had no way of going ashore. Indeed, Klein received the revelation that it would be very safe that night. This meant that he didn't need to change his appearance and move to another hotel. Around 9 in the morning of the next day, Klein saw Anderson Hood appear the moment he walked into the restaurant on the first floor and found a seat. Anderson immediately sat opposite him. This strongest hunter used his fingers to comb his short blonde hair, making it part 70-30. As he looked at Gehrman Sparrow, he'd sked with a laugh. Impressive, you managed to hunt Curtius even when fighting 1-on-3. The way you dragged the devil's corpse downstairs has already spread throughout Toscarter Pier. It's said that every pirate with a bounty on their head has decided to distance themselves from your sights. They will not appear anywhere within a 5-kilometer radius from you. Ever since he acquainted himself with Frank Lee, Klein had quit drinking milk. He raised his hand to order a cup of coffee, a piece of white bread, 2 toasts, a roasted pork sausage, and a plate of butter. Then he replied in an extremely calm manner, "Your ability at gathering intel is pretty good." Anderson chuckled. "This is necessary for a hunter." The Toscarter adventurers are discussing a serious question as to who is the strongest hunter. When Anderson saw Gehrman Sparrow look up with a cold and ambiguous gaze, his smile froze. "They've all chosen you. Haha, after all, this is the Sonia Sea and not the Fog Sea. Why did you need to add that second sentence?" "It's just asking for a beating," Klein casually asked, as though being indifferent. "Anything else?" Anderson suddenly felt his comprehension skills were impeded. "Any other intel?" Klein repeated himself with more details. "There is," Anderson suddenly signaled with his eyes. "Malsona from the Lone New Party has mysteriously disappeared last night. He mysteriously disappeared in his own room, while being protected by countless guards. The official explanation is that Malsona has already died. The reason was that he possibly consecrated an evil god, or summoned a devil. No one believes that. It's because the Church of Storms has received an anonymous letter that has detailed records of Malsona's crimes, as well as evidence." He stared intently at Gehrman Sparrow, hoping that the crazy adventurer would provide him with more information. He clearly remembered that Gehrman Sparrow had just asked him who deserved to be killed yesterday afternoon, and his answer was Malsona from the Lone New Party. Klein tersely responded without saying anything more. At this moment, a figure rushed into the hotel. After looking around, he walked towards Klein in delight. He was none other than the bar owner from before. "Mr. Sparrow." The owner took off a bonnet that had a depression in the middle and bowed. "It has already been confirmed, but the process will take another 2 days. After all, it's too large a sum. I know you'll be leaving today, so in order to not delay your schedule, I've decided to cover the bounty for now. Well, a portion of it comes from the bar's liquid cash, and a portion of it I loaned from my friends. Please make sure the number is right." He deliberately spoke in detail to express his goodwill to Gehrman Sparrow while earning a profit. He wanted to befriend this crazy adventurer. As for whether King of Immortality would seek revenge on him, he wasn't too worried. Many a time, Curtius would similarly claim bounties through him. After all, it was a reward for battles between pirates. Everyone liked gaining some additional cash. It was an unspoken rule at sea. Klein did a count of the thick stack of notes worth £6,000. He split them into a few stacks and placed them into different pockets. Then he said with a nod, "Not bad." The bar owner heaved a sigh of relief. He then warily surveyed his surroundings before suppressing his voice. "You have to be careful. King of Immortality is a very vengeful person. He might intercept your ship at sea." He didn't dare to say that he had the means to arrange for someone to board certain ships to depart in secret, afraid that it would be detected by King of Immortality, and that he would suffer retaliation as a result. "I know," Klein replied indifferently. The bar owner didn't speak further. He bowed once more and left the hotel's restaurant. "Do you have the means to leave?" Anderson looked at Gehrman Sparrow with a look of curiosity. "Guess." Klein revealed a gentlemanly smile. The corners of Anderson's lips twitched. "I'm relieved by seeing your confidence. By the way, the tickets. It sets sail at 1:30 in the afternoon. Impressive. I thought I was rather amazing earning £1,600 in a night. Who knew?" Klein didn't respond as he began enjoying his breakfast. Later, he made a new suit to prevent himself from lacking a change of clothes. Time passed and soon, it was time to board the ship. Anderson held a newly bought suitcase and looked at Gehrman Sparrow beside him. He asked, seemingly worried, "Are we just leaving on this ship? The death announcer should be around the surrounding waters. The future left yesterday after it was resupplied." He felt that leaving while under the wrath of the King of Immortality wasn't a wise choice. It's impossible for Gehrman Sparrow to be crazy enough to just storm right into death, right? Unless this is his trap. A thought came to Anderson as he had a hunch. Klein didn't turn his head to look at him. He directly boarded the liner with his suitcase. His thoughts were simple. It was likely that the death announcer could sense something wrong with its aura. Based on the King of Immortality's modus operandi, it was unlikely for him to make a forceful assault. If his assumption was wrong, then the moment the death announcer appeared along the horizon, Klein would immediately enter his room and pray to himself. Then, he would go above the gray fog to use the scepter to respond. He wanted to see who was stronger, the blatherer at sea or the sea god. This wasn't Klein's original plan. He had planned on using the sea god scepter's ability to command sea creatures to find an underwater carriage for himself. Then, under layers of protection from his charms, he would pull Anderson out into the waters and escape the range of the death announcer's blockade before secretly boarding a liner he had tickets to. However, in consideration that the target of revenge had disappeared all of a sudden, it was possible that the King of Immortality would vent his anger on others by slaughtering liners indiscriminately. After all, pirates didn't abide by the law, nor did they come with any proper morals. After divining above the gray fog, Klein ultimately decided to leave brazenly. Chapter 688. Fruitless wait. After hitting the deck, entering the cabin, and coming to his room, Klein was just about to say something when Anderson had spoke before he could. That's not right. If I were the passengers on board this ship, I'd definitely be very afraid and nervous to see an adventurer who just offended the King of Immortality. I'd either get the captain or first mate to convince you to switch to another ship, or I would switch ships myself. To my surprise, all of them are especially calm. This guy is very sharp. He's able to notice the minute details. Is this a real conspirer? Often acting happy-go-lucky, shooting off his mouth, and being optimistic, but in actuality, he has silently grasped the situation and made his preparations. As Klein opened the door with his key, he began considering if the ship had any real problems. At that moment, Anderson raised his hand to slap himself in the cheeks before laughing dryly. I get it. It happened just recently. The matter is only spread among a number of adventurers and pirates. Typical tourists and sailors wouldn't even know of this. Besides, people who know what you look like are definitely people with good intel, not ordinary people. Wow, he knows to answer his own questions. Do you know that time is life? Klein lampooned and entered the first-class cabin. It wasn't that he wished to enjoy comfort, but that he needed to watch over Anderson Hood. He didn't want this unluckiest hunter to bring disaster to the liner, so he had gotten him to book a first-class cabin for themselves. With a suitcase in hand, he walked straight to the master bedroom. Klein pointed at the guest room and the servant's room, and he said to Anderson, "Choose one for yourself." Anderson was taken aback as he turned Agape. "You're very used to this." "Of course, I have rich experience in interacting with hunters. If Danitz were here, I would designate him to the servant's room." Klein didn't answer as he entered the master bedroom. 1:30. The steam engine whistled as the liner set off on time. After hanging his coat, Klein walked out of the master bedroom in pants, a shirt and a vest. He looked out the window at the horizon. Thanks to the wind, the green waves ebbed as they spread along the outline of Toscarter Island inch by inch. That's no way to see the full situation. Anderson came over and smiled. You can only ensure that there are no problems from one of the flanks, and the death announcer might appear from the other flank, or the front. The best option is to climb up to the crow's nest. Haha, there's definitely a crew member there. But an experienced hunter or pirate has 100 means to fool his senses. Klein turned around and looked at Anderson with a stoic expression. Well said. I'll leave this to you. Ah. Anderson was taken aback. He snapped to his senses and asked in surprise, "You don't have any other means to observe?" Without any other means to observe, how was he to lay a trap for the King of Immortality? No. Klein nodded his head with abnormal frankness. I can only rely on you. Who gave you the courage to leave under the King of Immortality's scrutiny? Anderson was momentarily speechless. As he muttered to himself, "Don't stop me. I'm jumping ship." He left the cabin room and headed for the bottom of the crow's nest. In theory, King of Immortality Agalito, or the Death Announcer, should have long sensed my ill intent and sensed the danger that stems from me. Then will they attack? Will they believe that I'm at the level I show myself as, and that I don't have any help? Or will they suspect that some powerhouse who can interfere in their premonition for danger did something? Klein retracted his gaze from the door and looked once again at the sea outside. After a while, he suddenly sensed something as he quickly activated his spirit vision and turned his head to look to the side. The tall skeleton messenger burrowed out of the ground, the black flames in its eye sockets jumping slightly. It only revealed its upper body, so it wasn't too much taller than Klein. It looked at him at eye level and handed him a letter in its hand. Mr. Isaac replied pretty quickly this time. Klein politely nodded and received the neatly folded piece of paper. After the skeleton messenger collapsed and disappeared, he unfolded the letter against the sunlight coming in from the window. I'm very happy to hear about your advancement. Your travels have been more interesting than I had imagined. Those waters are indeed very dangerous. I vaguely remember that it might have to do with the source of the cataclysm. As for why there's a remnant aura of ancient death there, I'm not too sure. I will keep your warning in mind. Before completely recovering my memories, I will not enter those waters. The true creator's ravings aren't pleasant to the ears. I'm somewhat interested in the ring worn by Admiral Hell. However, I've recently been embroiled in some past matters. I might need some time before I pay him a visit. Upon seeing this, Klein couldn't help but smile. After replying to Mr. Isaac, I'll tell him that I have the means to lock onto Admiral Hell Ludwell's location. I must get him to bring me along with him when he pays a visit. Oh no, I didn't divine the location of the Murloc cufflink recently. I'm not sure if Ludwell has discovered it or thrown it away. Yes, I'll divine it above the gray fog after I confirm that the Death Announcer isn't pursuing me. Moving his gaze away, Klein continued reading. The ancient chronicles I received from Katerina does mention matters regarding artificial death. To put it simply, the former royal family of the Balam Empire, present upper echelons of the numinous episcopate, had gained inspiration from the hidden sage's sudden coming to life and turning anthropomorphic. They wished to let death, which is at present only a concept, to experience something similar. There's a possibility of it being fulfilled. Due to the indestructibility of Beyonder characteristics, the perishing of death doesn't mean that the corresponding Beyonder characteristics and authority has been completely lost. According to the chronicles, the corresponding research hasn't reached a breakthrough, but that was from centuries ago. The sequence for corresponding to seer is Bizarro Sorcerer. The powerhouses from the Antigonus and Zeradol family left me with a deep impression. Even though I've already forgotten the details, my recollections are still able to bring me some feelings of fear. As for where to get the formula and ingredients, I'm not sure. Perhaps you can consider switching to neighboring pathways. I've already recalled matters regarding this. You can choose Sequence 4 Secret Sorcerer of the Apprentice pathway, or Sequence 4 Parasite of the Marauder pathway. However, I vaguely remember that these three pathways only allow switching at Sequence 3. Indeed, there's only a roads left. Klein forcefully produced a grin. After reading the reply, he took out a pen and paper and wrote down parts of the content he had already thought of, as well as asking about the exact definition of a mythical creature. After putting down the pen and paper, he wasn't in a hurry to summon the messenger. He planned to wait for the Death Announcer to appear before adding the request for help into the letter, and then mailing it out. This way, he could hold out for some time with the Sea God Scepter, and he might even have Mr. Isaac tear through the spirit world to rescue him. When the time came, the two of them could join forces and have a chance to claim the Death Announcer as theirs. As for why he didn't write it ahead of time, it was because a devil might not come again, due to their premonition for danger. Of course, Klein had no idea whether they could sense the exact contents of his current ill intent. After patiently waiting for a few hours, Klein heard the door open. When he looked back, he saw Anderson stroking the side of his face. He walked in with mixed emotions. The Death Announcer hasn't appeared. We've completely left the waters around Toscarter Island. The King of Immortality actually didn't seek revenge. This fellow is more impressive than I imagined. Anderson sighed inwardly. Klein gave a regretful nod, walked to his coat rack, and took his coat and hat in preparation to head for the dining hall. In a secret chamber, a small red gloves team was discussing a case they were on. Solasurer Soist held a chalk and pointed at a blackboard. The devil murder case this time has some similarities with the assassination of Duke Negan in Backlund. First, a human skin with its own smell and aura appeared. This is something that hasn't appeared in many of the devil-related cases in the past. Second, there's more than one devil. They take turns wearing the human skin in order to carry out their normal activities, to conceal their partner's evil acts. Finally, they're suspected of belonging to the Beria family. At that moment, Leonard, who appeared to be listening attentively in the corner, couldn't help but recall something when his captain mentioned Backlund. Having witnessed the complete destruction of the underground ruin, he wanted to find time for himself to investigate the mysterious detective, Sherlock Moriarty. He had planned on starting from Sherlock Moriarty's former landlord, but his team took on an emergency case and began to investigate a new series of serial murders. He had no choice but to leave Backlund. Leonard, what's your take on this? After Soist finished his briefing, he named Leonard Mitchell to continue. Leonard turned his head to the side in a daze and looked at the content on the blackboard. He quickly organized his words and said, I believe that it's not only a form of concealment, but is also a requirement of a particular ritual. Captain Soist, as you know, devils have many kinds of blasphemous and evil rituals. Reasonable deduction. Soist then gestured for another team member to speak his piece. Phew, thankfully old man has recently been catching me up on devil studies. Leonard heaved a sigh of relief and began attentively listening to the discussion of his team. After a 2-day voyage, the liner safely arrived at Orvie Island. After checking into a hotel, Klein said to Anderson Hood, Wait here for me. That demigod doesn't like strangers suddenly visiting. He didn't wish to expose the contact person of the life school of thought. I hope I'll live to see him. Anderson smiled bitterly as he wished himself good luck. The corners of Klein's mouth twitched, and he gave up saying anything further. He rode on a carriage and went straight for the Church of Storm's St. Draco Cathedral. Before long, he arrived once again in the small room in the magnificent bell tower, where he saw the tall, extremely asymmetrical and ugly bellman Carnot. After hearing Gairman Sparrow's intentions, the hunched Carnot nodded. I'll bring you to Mr. Ricardo. He has already recovered, and is no longer where he originally was. All right. Just as Klein gave a response, he suddenly recalled that Carnot was a product of the Church of Mother Earth's human body refining. He then asked a question. Do you know Frank Lee? Chapter 689. That's it? Bellman Carnot's expression immediately turned odd when he heard Frank Lee's name. Yes, he's a kind and pure person, but at times his pureness is terrifying. Indeed. Klein made way and allowed the bellman to walk down the stairs. As he followed him down, he asked, Are you familiar with him? Carnot silently walked ahead, and after a while, he said with his back facing Gairman Sparrow, I'm a failed product filled with all kinds of problems. I was always mocked, and only Frank was one of the few who looked at me normally, treating me as someone with a real soul. Why did he leave the Church of Mother Earth? Klein asked despite knowing the answer. Carnot came out of the bell tower, answering while getting his bearings. I do not know about the specifics. He's an orphan. He grew up in the cloister from a young age. He really treats the church as a family and views Mother Earth as his mother. He has many strange ideas. He had the opportunity of becoming a diocese bishop, but he was later nearly sent to a tribunal for being sacrilegious. Frank mentioned this before. He was trying to crossbreed a bull, a cow, and wheat together. To be frank, if it were me, I would have sent him to the tribunal as well. This guy was fine early on because of his low sequence, limiting what he can do. Klein mumbled and followed Carnot down another street, and arrived in the alley behind St. Draco Cathedral. Carnot walked in front of an ordinary building, pulled the doorbell thrice, each tug lasting 2 seconds. After a while, thudding sounds approached as the door creaked open. Klein immediately saw an elder in a black short coat with a hard cane. His hair was as white as snow, but he didn't have any obvious wrinkles. He wore a black eye mask around his eyes. "Mr. Counselor, Mr. Gearman Sparrow is here to pay you a visit." "Counselor Ricardo? He's Counselor Ricardo? He's blind." Previously, Klein had only heard his voice without meeting him. It was no wonder he was surprised. Ricardo turned his ear to the side and slowly turned his head towards Gearman Sparrow and chuckled. "Sorry, I can only meet you this way. When I woke up this morning, I suddenly had a premonition that I mustn't open my eyes to see anything today. To prevent any accidents, I wore an eye mask." "You can actually do that?" "He's in no way inferior as a charlatan." Klein was momentarily amused and surprised. Following that, he understood the correct interpretation of his premonition. He didn't want to see him. He remembered that Beyonders from the monster pathway were able to see things others couldn't see. Therefore, Snake of Mercury Will Acceptin was able to sense my uniqueness. And back in Tinjin City, Adamosal's eyes bled, and he collapsed to the ground simply from seeing me. Counselor Ricardo sensed the danger and wore an eye mask ahead of time. "Sigh, if not for that, I was planning on asking what he can see." Klein didn't have any penchant about forcing others to harm themselves. He held back his thoughts and asked, "Do you have clues to the mystical item I need?" "Not for now," Ricardo said with a smile. "After I recovered from my injuries, I went to buy 'em. I was lucky that there was some adjustments to the upper echelons of the Navy and Governor General's office, so I successfully rescued Roy King. But it wasted quite a bit of my time." Klein had expected this as he said without any signs of surprise. "Then, I'll use this request to get another form of help. I have a friend who is plagued with bad luck after interacting with a mural left behind by the Angel of Fate. He needs it completely removed." Ricardo thought for a moment before saying, "No problem. Bring me over to him. Don't allow him to leave his residence, or there might be accidents." Klein nodded and walked towards the alley with his suitcase in hand. He took the opportunity to ask, "Mr. Counselor, what do you know about the Mother Tree of Desire?" From Klein's point of view, the Life School of Thought and the Rose School of Thought were at odds with each other, so it was likely that they knew each other very well. With cane in hand, Ricardo slowly walked behind him to his right. He didn't need anyone to help him. It was as though he wasn't wearing an eye mask. He chuckled. "The Mother Tree of Desire is the Rose School of Thought's manifestation of the Chain God. However, I suspect that the truth is actually the reverse. The Chain God is one of the Mother Tree of Desire's many manifestations. My reasoning is that Red Light Moria claims that the mutant pathway Sequence 0 is still unoccupied." "Heh, you know about Sequence 0, right?" "Yes," Klein succinctly answered. He didn't even express his knowledge of the Great White Brotherhood. Ricardo tersely acknowledged. "In short, no one knows the true identity of the Mother Tree of Desire, nor does anyone know what her pathway is. Perhaps that's her true identity. In addition, I can provide some indirect information. The Mother Tree of Desire and the Primordial Moon are at odds. There seems to be some irreconcilable conflict between them, and it's because of this that the Rose School of Thought views us as an enemy. However, at times, the Mother Tree of Desire and the Primordial Moon seem to have a subtle relationship. You might find it hard to imagine that the Southern Continent's Shaman King, who worships the moon, joined the Rose School of Thought. The 7 churches hate the true creator, Primordial Demoness, dark side of the universe, and the other evil gods. But their hatred for the Primordial Moon and Mother Tree of Desire runs even deeper. Similarly, the Aurora Order Demoness sect, Blood Sanctify sect, and Moses Ascetic Order do not like the Rose School of Thought." "That's interesting. Mother Tree of Desire is one of the 2 most isolated ones?" Klein stopped a carriage while in thought as he watched Carnot help Ricardo up the carriage. He then entered the carriage and instructed the driver to bring them to a nearby hotel. Before long, the carriage arrived at their destination. Just as Klein was about to get off, he suddenly heard a loud bang. A rumbling explosion shook the entire street as glass fragments from a window fell to the ground. No way. Could it be caused by Anderson's bad luck? Klein's spiritual intuition told him that it was the case, But the unluckiest hunter had apparently lived. He turned his head to look out the carriage, and saw that a huge chunk of wall had collapsed from the hotel's second floor. Flames and smoke remained. At this moment, a figure with disheveled blonde hair and messy clothes stood below as he muttered, "To think that there's such a daring person to trade arms in a hotel. New kinds of explosives especially. He nearly caused me to die without even knowing why. My suitcase." Klein looked down at the suitcase he was carrying, and suddenly felt how great it was to be cautious. He turned around, and helped Ricardo down the carriage. Anderson sensed something as he turned his head to say with a bitter smile, "The arms dealers these days are too unprofessional. Thankfully it's daytime, and there aren't many people in the hotel. The owner sure is pitiful, having to suffer a certain loss. However, the gold they carry shouldn't be destroyed that easily. It should make up for his loss. I think your bad luck is responsible for a large part of the accountability." Klein nodded and said to Ricardo, "It's him." Ricardo then turned his head to Anderson, but his gaze was completely blocked by the black eye mask. He paused for a few seconds before smiling. "Give me a gold coin." "Oh." Anderson took out a lone gold coin from the inside of his clothes, feeling suspect. Then he smiled at Gehrman Sparrow. "Tradition from my hometown. We sew a tiny pocket on the inside of our clothes to keep a few coins. I originally didn't believe in it, but I've been just too unlucky recently." As he spoke, he handed the gold coin to Ricardo. Ricardo received the gold coin, slowly closed his fingers, before retracting his hand. He then laughed and said, "All right. Your bad luck has been dispelled." "Ah." Anderson stood there in shock as he looked at Gehrman Sparrow, as though saying, "That's it? Did you get a fraud?" Klein was surprised as well, but he chose to believe Ricardo. After all, he was a fate counselor. Ricardo put away the gold coin and chuckled. "The bad luck you received this time wasn't child's play. If you don't believe me, you can head over to the casino to try your luck." "Makes sense." Anderson clapped, and immediately got directions for the nearest casino from a passerby. After a while, he returned in a clean and decent jacket. He looked at Ricardo, and instinctively opened his mouth. He was suddenly taken aback as he forcibly closed his mouth, and thanked him with a grin. After the demigod was sent on a carriage, he leaned in towards Gehrman Sparrow and wistfully said, "I was planning on saying that although you're blind, you really are amazing when it comes to the domain of fate." Thankfully, I recalled in time that he's a demigod. "If you had really said that, you might have the chance of becoming the hunter, who died immediately after having his bad luck removed." Klein didn't echo his sentiments as he said, "Now can you tell me the clues to that revolver?" As creeping hunger had great limitations, he still wished for a more conventional offensive mystical item. Anderson combed his hair and chuckled. "It's embark. It's from a friend I used to know, a very powerful adventurer. As he got sick of the unstable and dangerous life, he used his savings to buy a few spice gardens, and found a lady to marry. He then completely left this line of work we're in. He recently had a child, and his thoughts changed again. He began to wish that his child would be brought up in a better and safer environment with better educational prospects. So he plans on moving to Backland. There are the best grammar schools and public schools there. Ha. He doesn't wish to rent a place in Backland, but he also doesn't plan on selling his gardens that constantly earn him money. He happens to have an excess when it comes to mystical items, so he plans on selling that revolver. Back then, I was in a rush to follow the treasure hunting expedition into those waters, so I'm not sure if he succeeded in the end. However, few people can buy something worth nearly £10,000 at once, so the transaction won't close that easily." "All right, bring me to him," Klein replied simply. At that moment on the Golden Dream, Danitz was horrified to realize a problem. His captain hadn't appeared in 3 days. Chapter 690. Miss Messenger Under the Sunlight. The Golden Dream emitted golden lusters, as if it was a mobile treasure. Danitz stood inside the captain's cabin, pacing about endlessly. He attempted to recall everything that had happened over the past few days, in a bid to find a clue. 3 days ago, his captain, Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina, wanted to do a study in which she might not appear for 10 to 20 hours. Therefore, all corresponding classes were cancelled. In regards to this, Danitz and company didn't find it odd. These happened frequently. They were delighted that they didn't need to attend classes. Hence, there was drinking, singing, and a bonfire party held on the ship. They were only short of burning down the Golden Dream, but they had a great time. But with the passage of time, everyone gradually felt that something was amiss, including the somewhat slow Danitz. Their captain, who should have finished her studies within 24 hours, didn't appear the next day. She didn't even get anyone to send her food or light beer, which was used as water. After patiently waiting for half a day without seeing Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina, the sailors mustered the courage to knock on her door. To their horror, there wasn't any response. Under the first mate, Brew Walls's lead, the pirates opened the captain's cabin and found it empty. They then went to the collector's room and other places, but they failed to find her. Based on past experiences, their initial guess was that their captain had suddenly thought of something and left the Golden Dream in a rush, while using some mystical technique, or emulating someone else's beyonder powers, without leaving a letter behind. Later, Danitz and company attempted to contact her using methods like the Soulfall ritual, but they failed to receive a response. All they could do was search the captain's cabin and other places, as they convinced themselves to wait patiently. 3 days passed, but Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina didn't appear nor reply. It left the sailors panicking. Dogs hit, any results from your divination? Didn't you claim to be an expert? Danitz turned towards Flowery Bowtie Jodson in frustration. Jodson, with his black hair that was dyed gold, rubbed his temples and said in a rather mellow voice, "They failed. Every divination method used to find her has failed. But for now, it can be confirmed that Captain is still alive. It's just that her whereabouts are unknown." The first mate Walls, who had short grayish curly hair, nudged his monocle and said, "We need to seek help. None of Captain's collections have been lost. She didn't even bring her essential mystical items with her when she left. This means that the situation was very sudden and unexpected. Whose help can we seek?" Another bosun whose waist was swollen, Bucket Daniels, asked anxiously. Brew Walls raised his silver-patterned knife to his aquiline nose and said, "Return to the western shore." Between the lines, he was hinting at seeking the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom that backed Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina. "That won't do. To go from the pirates' playground to the western shore, we will need to pass the Sonia Sea, the North Sea, and the Berserk Sea. Then, we will cruise through the Fog Sea for a very long period of time. Captain can't wait that long. Anything might happen to her at any time." Flowery Bowtie Jodson said, "We have to immediately find someone we can quickly contact and provide us with help on short notice." Danitz wanted to curse Dog's Hit when he suddenly had a light bulb moment. There was only one person he could quickly contact, and that was Gehrman Sparrow. Furthermore, this crazy adventurer had never hid the fact that he was good at divination and also had a mysterious background. Perhaps that madman can find Captain. He's often able to do the impossible. Danitz tugged at his collar as he felt his worry and frustration ease a little. He raised his chest and looked around. Then he cleared his throat and said, "I have a candidate. I can immediately contact him. Besides, he's very good at divination." Just as he said that, Gourmet Brew Walls, Flowery Bowtie Jodson, Iron Skin Barrel, and company turned their heads at him in unison. With their eyes red, they roared, "What are you waiting for?" Danitz silently left the captain's cabin and returned to his room. He unfolded a piece of paper, picked up a fountain pen, and followed his captain's teachings by writing a greeting followed by some pleasantries. Suddenly he stopped writing. He felt that the excessive politeness and small talk didn't match his goals for seeking help. Dog's Hit. Danitz cursed as he tore up the piece of paper. Right on the heels of that, he wrote on a new piece of paper, "Help! Captain has vanished." Well, although Gehrman Sparrow is a madman who can't be comprehended with common sense, he probably won't be able to understand such a letter. Dog's Hit. Danitz cursed himself again as he ripped up the second letter. He calmed himself down and contemplated for a few seconds before pinning a third time. This time, He simply wrote what happened after his captain's disappearance. He also included the location of the Golden Dream. And he minced his words by asking Mr. Gehrman Sparrow if he could provide help to a cooperating partner. Divination needs something. Just as Danitz folded the letter, he suddenly realized that he had forgotten something. He rushed back to the captain's cabin and found a pearl earring that Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina often wore. After doing all of this, he took out his notebook that was filled with all sorts of mysticism knowledge. He flipped to the corresponding page and unfamiliarly set up a messenger summoning ritual with his past experience. After placing a gold coin on the altar, he took 2 steps back and recited in ancient Hermes, I summon in my name the spirit that wanders about the unfounded, the friendly creature that can be subordinated, the messenger that belongs to Gehrman Sparrow. Howling winds resonated as the candlelight on the altar rapidly burgeoned before being dyed a pale whiteness. Rionette Tinker appeared at a decent speed, still wearing her complicated black dress, while holding 4 beautiful and identical heads. Danitz imagined that the messenger would bite the gold coin, and the envelope containing the paper, an earring like the last time. But to his surprise, the 4 heads in Rionette Tinker's hand automatically turned around, surveying the area before finally looking towards the captain's cabin. A few seconds later, 2 of the heads in Rionette Tinker's hand bit down onto the gold coin and the envelope. After the strange messenger vanished, Danitz exhaled and wiped his forehead, feeling a baffling sense of pressure. Orvie Island, in the room of another hotel, Klein was just about to get Anderson Hood, who had won quite a fair bit of money, to purchase the tickets to City of Generosity by him, when his spiritual perception was triggered. He quickly activated his spirit vision and saw his headless messenger, Rionette Tinker, appear by his side at some point in time. In her hands were 4 beautiful heads. She's not like the skeleton messengers, who I can detect the moment they appear. My spiritual perception is triggered only after she completely enters the real world. Klein received a letter from the teeth of one of Rionette Tinker's head while in thought. At the same time, he noticed that Anderson's spiritual perception was no way weaker than his. He too had reacted. This is a messenger? Anderson asked in disbelief, as though he had heard of such things, but had never seen them before. Klein nodded without expression as he tore open the letter. A pearl earring? Klein unfolded the letter in puzzlement. By his side, Anderson came over out of curiosity as he sized up Rionette Tinker as he'd sked. There's an indescribable sense of bloody beauty. Just as he said that, his hands suddenly rose up to grab himself by the throat. The grip was so tight that his tongue extended out as he foamed at the mouth. As for Rionette Tinker, who had nothing above her neck, she didn't show any further reaction. Klein turned his head over and seriously studied the situation before looking at his messenger. He then silently mumbled, "Resembles Miss Sharon's abilities. Miss Messenger belongs to the prisoner pathway? No, I can't be sure. She's a spirit world creature, so being good at such things is very normal." Realizing that Anderson was about to suffocate, Klein leisurely said, "That's enough, he still needs to lead me somewhere." One of the heads in Rionette Tinker's hand turned over as she glanced at Anderson with her bloodshot eyes for a second. Following that, each of the heads' mouths spoke one after the other. "Still can lead you by making into zombie." As she said that, Anderson's hands finally stopped and left his own neck, leaving obvious, deep finger marks on it. Phew, phew. The strongest hunter panted as he bent his back, retching. Klein quickly scanned the letter and saw that it was from Danitz. This famous pirate wrote to him, saying that Vice Admiral Iceberg had mysteriously vanished and was in need of help. Just as he moved his gaze away from the letter, Klein was surprised to see Rionette Tinker was still around. This doesn't make mystical sense. Shouldn't a messenger disappear after sending the letter, appearing only when summoned again? Klein deliberated and asked out of curiosity, "Is there anything else?" "Awaiting your reply, letter," Rionette's 4 heads said one after the other. "How do you know that I'll reply?" Klein glanced at Anderson, who hadn't recovered. and confirmed that the strongest hunter didn't notice the words that didn't match Gehrman's persona. The heads in Rionette's hand said once again, her disappearances. Very odd. How do you know that? Klein instantly imagined that Miss Messenger had secretly read Danet's letter. The heads with the long blonde hair simply rolled up and said a phrase each, forming a complete sentence. I investigated the ship's situation. My messenger is a part-time scout? Miss Rionette Tynker, will you be a hired goon in the future? I wonder if I need to make additional payment. As Klein lampooned in thought, he said, no rush. I'll reply later. He planned on heading above the gray fog to use Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina's earring to do a divination. Rionette Tynker didn't say a word as she vanished silently. Ahem. Anderson finally recovered as he stood straight. He gave Gehrman Sparrow a flabbergasted look. Your messenger is a demigod. Chapter 691. Meeting There's no need for you to tell me. I've more or less confirmed it moments ago. Upon hearing Anderson Hood, Klein wore a calm expression as he mumbled inwardly. Back when he encountered Rionette Tynker in the spirit world, where he saw her massive true form and Gothic-styled castle, Klein already believed that she wasn't someone to be messed with. And with Miss Messenger almost killing the strongest hunter with such ease, it made him believe without a doubt that she was a demigod. A sequence 4 at the very least. A demigod is willing to help me deliver letters for a gold coin per trip? It's obvious that things aren't that simple. Miss Messenger must have her motives. Of course, I can't disregard how I'm always encountering all sorts of strange matters. It might have piqued her interest, and she doesn't mind being a messenger since she happens to be free. Similar situations include Erodza's fawning and Snake of Mercury, while Septon's friendliness. Regardless, I should be wary and not fully trust her. Before having a chance to discuss similar matters, I shouldn't consider blowing the harmonica whenever I encounter danger. Who knows if Miss Messenger will just directly rip me to shreds? Klein instantly had many thoughts go through his mind while he continued wearing a stoic expression. Faced with the alarmed Anderson, all he did was slightly nod his head. It's none of your business. This guy is really mysterious. A spirit world creature at the demigod level is his messenger. Besides, he casually knows a demigod that's good at improving a person's luck. It's no wonder he's so calm and composed after offending the King of Immortality. It's no wonder the King of Immortality didn't dare to seek revenge or even appear. Anderson suddenly came to a realization, as he couldn't help but carefully size up Gehrman Sparrow. Oh! Klein emotionlessly swept his gaze at the strongest hunter. Anderson hurriedly retracted his gaze as he chuckled dryly. I realized that you're very suitable to being the main lead of a figure painting, the kind that has a dark, gloomy background. This really accentuates your bearing. How about it? Do you want to consider it? I can help you draw a portrait. Believe me, I'm a master at this. Klein couldn't be bothered to listen to his nonsense. He lifted his golden pocket watch and opened it. Return to your room. I'll come for you in 5 minutes. All right, Anderson replied with a beaming smile. After the strongest hunter left, Klein took out Azek's copper whistle and Will Septon's paper crane before entering the bathroom, where he set up a ritual. After placing Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina's pearl earring above the gray fog, Klein sat at the end of the long bronze table. There, he conjured a pen and paper and wrote a simple divination statement. Edwina Edwards's location. Holding the paper and earring, Klein leaned back into the chair and recited the divination statement as he entered a dream with cogitation. First, a gray world occupied his vision. Following that, plains blanketed in ice and snow were reflected in his eyes. The howling snowstorm enveloped everything as the area was covered with thick fog. It didn't appear like a real frontier. Klein quickly saw Edwina's figure. Her long brown was tied up simply at the back, as the rest of it fluttered wildly in the snowstorm. Dressed in dark-colored trousers and a white waist-fitting shirt with complicated flowery patterns along the collar and sleeves, she gave off the feeling as though she was frail in such an environment. Edwina's feet, which were clad in leather boots, kept moving across the snow, leaving behind a series of clear footprints. But they were quickly wiped away by the violent snowstorm. The screen shattered in turn as Klein opened his eyes. He realized that he couldn't interpret Vice Admiral Iceberg's actual location from his divination's revelation. The poles? Faceax plains of Evernight? There's no way to confirm. Apart from the snowstorm, there aren't any features. Klein sat up and put down the pearl earring and the paper with the divination statement. After contemplating for a few seconds, he confirmed another matter. Edwina Edwards had really vanished. She wasn't in the Golden Dream, but it could also eliminate the possibility that it was a trap. Klein cautiously performed some divination on this matter and received the result that there weren't any traps on the Golden Dream. After some thought, he left the mysterious space above the gray fog and, via a series of procedures, brought the pearl earring back to the real world. Recalling the map of the waters around Orvie Island and the present location of the Golden Dream, Klein selected an uninhabited island that fishermen used to seek shelter from storms. In the letter, he got Danitz and company to steer their ship to somewhere not too far from there. After folding the letter, he blew his harmonica and once again saw Miss Messenger holding up the 4 heads. While handing over the reply letter, Klein coughed slightly and said, "Can you confirm Danitz's location?" One of the heads in Rionette Tinker's hand nodded before the rest spoke. "Yes. As long as he's not beyond range." Seeing that Miss Messenger remained floating there without any signs of leaving, he said with his eyes looking to the side, "The gold coin will be paid by Danitz." "All right." Rionette Tinker's figure quickly phased away. Phew. Klein exhaled. After some precise preparations and dealing with the scene, he carried his suitcase which he had finished packing and walked out of the room. He then knocked on Anderson Hood's door. "We'll go somewhere else first before heading to Byam," he calmly told the strongest hunter of his decision. "You can choose to wait for me in Byam or follow me." Anderson gave a cheeky smile and said, "I can feel my adventurer's blood burning in me. I'm very curious as to what matter that messenger has brought. I thought I had no means of knowing better, but to my surprise, you actually invited me." "I didn't. I'm only giving you 2 choices." Klein coldly turned around and walked to the staircase. Anderson hurriedly carried his newly bought suitcase and followed behind. Out of the hotel, Klein took a carriage to leave the port city. Then, he walked to the periphery of an uninhabited cliff on Mount St. Draco. Looking at the waves crashing into the cliff below, Anderson looked around in surprise. "This is our destination?" Klein ignored his question. He took out a charm made of tin and softly chanted the incantation, "Storm." He infused his spirituality and split the charm into 2. Half of it for himself, while the other half was used to augment Anderson. The remaining one was thrown down the cliff. Underwater breathing, deep-sea membrane. Anderson identified the additional supernatural effects applied to him in surprise. At that moment, there was a loud splash beneath the cliff. A massive creature that resembled a whale surfaced from the sea. It was entirely dark blue in color. Its mouth was open, revealing its white teeth and blood-colored interior. Klein walked to the edge of the cliff and jumped straight down. With the charm's powers, he gently landed in the undersea behemoth's mouth. Anderson watched blankly before he jumped down in excitement, landing beside Klein. The massive undersea creature closed its mouth, turning the interior pitch black. Then, it submerged itself and began swimming for its designated destination. Inside its mouth, Klein's eyes produced a flash of lightning as he saw through the darkness. He found a tooth to lean against as he casually sat down. Due to the protection from deep-sea membrane, he wasn't afraid that his clothes would be dirted. "Man, this is quite fascinating." Anderson surveyed the area and asked curiously, "How did you come up with this? How are you doing this?" "Of course it's by praying to myself, then using the sea god's scepter to pull a suitable undersea creature from nearby." Klein didn't reply Anderson's question. He half closed his eyes as though he was resting. "It's just a little stuffy." Anderson took out a cigar case and matchstick from his pocket. "Can I smoke in here?" "Ask it." Klein didn't open his eyes. Anderson chuckled dryly before putting away the cigar and matchstick. I don't think it will like the smell of tobacco. In the dark sea, this massive creature swam quickly, efficiently drawing out the oxygen in the water via the use of its special organs from time to time. After an unknown period of time, it surfaced in front of an uninhabited island. After using the charm's power to go ashore, Klein took off his hat and bowed at the undersea creature. "You're very polite," Anderson said in amusement when he saw this scene. "I've always been very polite, even if I'm facing prey." Klein shot a glance at him, as though he was including him. Anderson chuckled dryly as he pointed to the other side of the island. "There's a ship there. Oh, it's the Golden Dream." At that moment in time, Klein had also seen the sailboat that had been scrubbed clean. On the ship, spanning dozens of meters, a lustrous main cannon that didn't belong there was swirling with stacked cymbals. He immediately went over with his suitcase, and before long, he arrived where the Golden Dream was anchored. Then, he saw Danitz jump down from the deck as he ran across the water. Just as Danitz arrived before Gehrman Sparrow, deliberating on what to say, he suddenly saw a familiar figure. "Anderson Hood!" He pointed at the strongest hunter as he yelled. Anderson immediately roared with laughter. "You didn't expect me, right?" Although he didn't know why he would encounter the Golden Dream, this didn't stop him from having the idea of occupying the ship by force. "You know each other?" Klein indifferently swept his gaze towards Danitz. Danitz instinctively shuddered as he forced a smile. "This guy isn't a good egg. In the Fog Sea, he's often pursued by a bunch of pirates. But in the end, all of those pirates would end up as bounty rewards. You might not be aware, but he started off in the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. Later, he was banished after failing his exams repeatedly. I heard all of this from Captain. They were former classmates." He gave Anderson a look of contempt, mocking his low intelligence. As for Flowery Bowtie Jotson and company on the ship, all of them showed similar expressions. Anderson's gaze slowly swept across their faces before tsking. "That's not the main point. The main point is that I once pulled at your captain's hair." The scene instantly turned extremely silent as Danitz couldn't stop his expression from twisting. Chapter 692. Suspects seeing everyone on the Golden Dream aim their sights at Anderson, Klein took a step forward and said to Danitz, his side facing him, "Bring me to the captain's cabin." All right. Danitz retracted his angry glare aimed at Anderson Hood. Prioritize captain's rescue. Prioritize captain's rescue," he kept repeating to himself. The Golden Dream first released a dinghy before lowering a gangway, allowing Klein to easily step onto the deck without using a charm. Anderson followed by his side, completely ignoring the glares of the Golden Dream's crew. With a smile, he strolled forward as he looked around, treating it as his own home. His mental fortitude is truly beyond remarkable. Yes, even after offending a demigod where he was forced to apologize in public and accept a mission, he was able to laugh at himself and enjoy a meal. Klein sighed inwardly as he walked towards third mate Jotson and company. "Hello, Mr. Sparrow. I'm this ship's first mate, Brew Walls." A 1.8-meter-tall man, with a monocle politely bowed. The pirate gourmet, who's worth 6,200 pounds. The bounties on Vice Admiral Iceberg's pirate crew are clearly lower than Admiral of Stars. They live up to being treasure hunters, who happen to be part-time pirates. Klein greeted him using Gehrman Sparrow's style of politeness. "Hello. I've heard about you." "Haha, it's my honor. I'm only a treasure hunter who dreams to be an artisan, but I ended up having to be a gourmet," Brewall said in a self-deprecating manner. He pointed to the man beside him and said, "Our second mate, Singer Orpheus. Bounty of 5,500 pounds. The Beyonders on the Golden Dream all have very odd nicknames. I didn't know that they were the subordinates of a pirate admiral. I would have definitely believed them to be a traveling crew who sing and enjoy good food, while holding bonfires, as they seek out legendary treasure. It's truly a beautiful life." Klein cast his gaze at Orpheus and nodded. The singer had deep sculpted outlines, and a head of resplendent blonde hair. He said with a sad smile, "Actually, I'm only praising the sun, but now my son has disappeared." Klein nearly felt goosebumps all over him. Tisk, as expected of someone from Intis. He speaks like he's singing. What a pity. I grew up in Seeger, in Lemberg, and didn't pick up this ability, Anderson said with a chuckle. It wasn't clear if he was praising or degrading Orpheus. After all, half the blood flowing in his veins was Intis blood. Born in Senior and later studied in Lemberg. Yes, it was likely a church school. He's classmates with Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina. Mr. Orpheus is definitely from the Sun Pathway, but he's unlikely to be from the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sunday. From his bounty, he's likely a Sequence 6 notary. I almost forgot to inform little son that I have his formula. I wonder what he will use in exchange this time. Klein turned towards Flowery Bowtie Jotson and Bucket Daniels, before Gourmet Brew Walls introduced. We've met. Let's not waste any time. All right. Brew Walls heaved a sigh of relief, stroked his short beard, and led the way into the cabin. If it wasn't for how famous Gehrman Sparrow was on the ship, he wouldn't have been that polite. At that moment, Anderson deliberately stayed behind, walking alongside Danitz, Orpheus, and company. He looked to his left and right, unfazed by how the surrounding pirates looked like they wanted to rip him apart. He laughed with a TSK. The one you should be wary of isn't me. Yes, we aren't wary of you. We only want to stuff you in. See that? Into that cannon. Danitz wasn't afraid that Anderson was the strongest hunter. After all, they were on the Golden Dream. There were plenty of pirates, and many of them were Sequence 6 or 7 Beyonders. Anderson curled his lips. I'm actually not a threat. Think about it. Your captain definitely hates and detests me. She wouldn't even want to speak to me. Isn't that ideal? Danitz turned agape, but he didn't say a thing. He suddenly felt that what the pile of dogs had said made sense. The looks in the eyes of Orpheus, Jodson, and company also subconsciously turned gentle. Anderson chuckled as he looked at them. He said in a rather ethereal tone, "The person you should be wary about is Gehrman Sparrow." Why? Danitz blurted out. Although he's a madman that warrants the need to be wary of him. He's not an enemy at the moment. Danitz silently added. Anderson laughed. I'm assuming that Gehrman successfully finds your captain and rescues her. Will your captain have fond feelings for him as a result? Besides, he looks pretty good. He has that cold and aloof aesthetic and is strong. He's at the level of a pirate admiral. And his background is especially mysterious. He's completely compatible. How is it possible? Danitz wished to retort, but he was momentarily at a loss for words. He felt increasingly more convinced that things weren't right. Orpheus and company had their expressions collapse bit by bit. They looked at Gehrman Sparrow's back with a newfound sense of wariness. Resolved. The provocation problem from before has been resolved. With a smile, Anderson walked into the cabin. When he arrived inside the captain's cabin, Klein first circled the room, which was nearly filled with bookshelves. On it were all kinds of books. The average captain's cabin is filled with racks of alcohol. He silently mumbled before walking straight to the desk by the window. According to Danitz's description, Edwina had vanished during her research. Therefore, finding traces of her research was Klein's goal. After he gathered enough information, he would head above the gray fog to divine the matter. At that moment, the desk was a mess with many things placed on it. There was white paper, a fountain pen, an ink bottle, a bronze dagger, and untidily stacked books. In the middle of the desk was a book made of goatskin. Its dark brown cover had the words Grozel's Travels, written in ancient Fasak. Isn't this one of Vice Admiral Iceberg's collections? It has a mysterious origin, and is suspected to be related to the Dragons and City of Miracles, Liveseed. Edwina was studying this before she disappeared. Klein looked at the book and instinctively made a guess. Seeing Gehrman Sparrow study the ancient book, Danitz forced a smile and said, There's nothing wrong with it. We have already inspected it. Is that so? I seriously doubt your meticulousness. Since someone had flipped it, and there weren't any obvious abnormalities with it. Together with the fact that Klein determined that Danitz was saying the truth with his spiritual intuition, Klein reached out for it and asked, Have you read Grozel's Travels? Danitz shook his head. Brew Walls, Orpheus, Jodson, and company shook their heads as well. Their expressions seemed to say that their daily studies were tiring enough. They didn't wish to read any other books during their breaks. Swiping his fingertip across the yellowish-brown goatskin, Klein carefully and seriously read each page. Soon, he arrived at the spot where the pages were stuck together. From the corner of his eye, he saw what was written in it. That's not right. His gaze focused as he hurriedly flipped 2 pages back. He clearly remembered that his previous read stopped at Giant Grozel, and his team preparing to challenge the Frost Dragon, the King of the North, in a head-on clash. There was nothing after that, but now there were 2 more pages. It also meant that the stuck pages had thinned, and the book had 2 more pages. The chapters came to a halt for 1,000 years before it was continued. These are the fruits of Vice Admiral Iceberg's research? This also led to her disappearance. As Klein lampooned, he frowned as he read the additional content. The 2 pages described a lost female pirate. She encountered the King of the North in a blizzard, and she was nearly killed. Only by using all her strength was she successful in escaping, before meeting the main lead's team, who were here to challenge the Frost Dragon. There's the addition of a female pirate. Female pirate. Klein ruminated over this description, as an idea suddenly came to him. Could she be Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina? She entered the book and became a character in the story. With this idea in mind, Klein quickly realized certain problems. Rhodes mentioned before that the past owners of Grozel's Travels vanished. Grozel's Travels has a giant from the Dark Epoch, which is also the second epoch, an elf, an ascetic from the third or fourth epoch, a Solomon Empire noble, and a fifth epoch lone soldier. The times are extremely chaotic. If they were all the past owners of Grozel's Travels who disappeared, that will solve the problem. They do not belong to the same period, and they were swallowed by the book, becoming a character in the story. Klein found his theory ridiculous as he thought about it, but it was highly likely. In the world of mysticism, this isn't impossible. I have to confirm it. Besides, what did Edwina and the past owners do to be swallowed by the book? And what should I do to release them? Klein retracted his gaze and thought deeply in silence. Soon he looked up at Danitz and company. Prepare items like candles. I will be praying for an answer from a secret existence. And that secret existence is myself. Klein added inwardly in jest. He really is professional and crazy. Gourmet Brew Walls and company didn't dare to speak further. They hurriedly provided the materials before leaving the captain's cabin. They didn't dare to watch such dangerous rituals unless Gehrman Sparrow requested them to do so. Inside the captain's cabin, Klein locked the door, closed the windows, and quickly set up the ritual. Then he brought Grozel's Travels above the gray fog. After placing the ancient book at the end of the long bronze table, he sat down and conjured a pen and paper. He then scribbled a divination statement. Edwina is in the story of this book. Chapter 693. Attempt. After putting down the fountain pen in his hand, Klein removed the spirit pendulum from his left wrist, holding it in one hand, and letting it hang down over the paper in close proximity. Edwina is in the story of this book. Klein closed his eyes and silently repeated the divination statement. After he recited the statement, he opened his eyes and saw the topaz pendant spinning clockwise. This meant that Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina was inside Grozel's Travels. It really is a world inside a book. Furthermore, the situation inside is very special. Without new characters, the story isn't able to continue. Klein indiscernibly nodded, wounding the silver chain and the topaz pendant around his wrist again. He picked up a dark red fountain pen and wrote a new divination statement. The method to entering Grozel's Travels. This time he used dream divination. In the gray, hazy world, he saw indistinct figures. The figures were of varying sizes, some huge, others slender. The thing all of them had in common was that they held a book with pages of yellowish-brown goatskin. The following developments branched off into 2 scenarios. A number of them vanished silently with Grozel's Travels on them. The others would accidentally or deliberately drip their blood on the cover, while carrying Grozel's Travels with them, before suddenly vanishing. The scene shattered and Klein opened his eyes to see the modeled table in front of him. He frowned as he made an interpretation. To enter or activate Grozel's travels, it either needs prolonged contact with it to a certain extent, or you would need to drip one's blood onto the cover. Isn't that too simple? Perhaps it's really that simple. In the story, the lone soldier's first appearance was as an ordinary person who didn't know mysticism. With the help of his companions, he slowly became a disciplinary paladin. Therefore, the activation method isn't too complicated. An ordinary person is able to accomplish it. A small number of researchers before this, including Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina, were beyonders with sufficient amounts of mysticism knowledge. They knew not to rashly drip their blood, otherwise, death might occur without them even knowing it. This is akin to ordinary people using the correct form of magic mirror divination. It's very easy to provoke a powerful existence or secret existence. It's why no problems happen to them. Furthermore, Edwina keeps Grozel's travels in the collector's room most of the time, and only interacts with it occasionally. As such, it was only when she recently had a new research concept that she had prolonged contact with it, completing the condition required to activate the book? Yes, even Erodes only knew that there's something strange with the book. Many of the past owners had vanished, and it's suspected to have something to do with the Dragons and City of Miracles, Liveseed. This means that Grozel's travels will interfere with its surroundings when being activated. Therefore, most of the collectors in the past do not know of its problem, and had no thoughts of studying it. The owners who disappeared likely aren't limited to the ones in the story. The others might have died for all kinds of reasons, failing to leave their names in the book. Klein focused again, and made another divination, hoping to obtain the method to leave Grozel's travels. This time, he saw a more tempestuous blizzard in the gray, hazy dreamscape. He saw a gigantic figure at the top of an ice peak. It was a translucent dragon who remained nearly 5 meters tall, while standing on all fours. It resembled a lizard's cousin, and had an ugly face with eerie blue eyes. It had a thick, powerful tail, and a pair of gigantic wings covered in a skin membrane on its back. It seemed to blot out the sky simply by spreading its wings. Its scales resembled ice crystals, as they swirled with a crystalline glow. It was the most beautiful and dreamy part of its entire body. Suddenly, the dragon, which resembled an ice sculpture, raised its neck and body, and it let out a terrifying roar that penetrated through the blizzard. At that moment, it reached 10 meters tall by standing up on its hind legs. King of the North. That frost dragon. Klein left the dream, and tapped the armrest of the high-back chair. His interpretation of the divination revelation was that the key to leaving Grozel's travels lay with the King of the North. Klein's initial guess was that only by helping the main lead, Grozel, accomplish his goal, slaying the frost dragon, would the story come to a complete end, opening a passageway to exit the book. However, I can also attempt to see if I can forcibly break open the barrier between the world in the book and the real world. Klein relied on his rich experience to quickly come up with an attempt. He first picked up the Black Emperor card, which was facing down, and he infused it into his spirit body. Suddenly, Klein's body was covered in black full-body armor. On his head was a heavy crown as his aura became majestic and dignified. It exuded an awe-inspiring vibe. Following that, he stirred the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog to the limit, making them surge over like a tidal wave. Upon seeing this scene, Klein didn't hesitate to summon the sea god scepter from the junk pile, before he infused his spirituality within. The blue gems on the end of the bone scepter lit up one after another, emitting a blinding luster. Countless silver bolts of lightning surfaced, as they zapped about the grand palace, as though they were forming a sea of lightning. Finally, Klein used the suppressive power and balance from the Black Emperor's loftiness to infuse the stirred powers into the lightning storm. Rumble! Thunder resonated above the gray fog, and into the distance as thick bolts of lightning smote down, striking Grozel's travels. Blinding light enveloped the entire palace for a full 20 seconds. After everything was over, Klein looked at the target again, and discovered the modeled table was in shambles. As for the dark brown leather book, It was completely unharmed. Only its ends curled up a little. It's far more impressive than I imagined. That's right. How can an item which can create a whole new book world be simple? Ha! I wouldn't have made a loss buying it for £8,000 back then. It can be used as a shield. It can definitely defend against attacks from saints. The only problem is its tiny size. It won't be able to shield much. Klein's thoughts raced as the bronze table was quickly restored to normal. Since there was no way to forcibly tear open the barrier between the world inside the book and the real world, he could only consider how to enter it according to the normal procedures. Get some blood, bring it up here and smear it across the cover, and then enter as a spirit body with the Blood Emperor card and Sea God Scepter? This way, I don't have to worry about encountering King of the Five Seas, Nast, as there's no way he can sense it. He won't be able to enter the world inside the book either. But the problem lies in the fact that rescuing Vice Admiral Iceberg this way will allow her to determine that Gehrman Sparrow is Hero Bandit Black Emperor. Yes, there's a more important problem. Entering with a spirit body means that the body is still in the outside world, the captain's cabin of the Golden Dream. I have no idea how time flows in the world inside the book. It might easily be a few days. That way, my body might meet with an accident since it lacks protection. I'm in unfamiliar territory as well. When the time comes, I might rescue Edwina, but I would find myself gone. That would be fun. Klein quickly rejected the idea of entering as a spirit body. He didn't trust most of the people on the Golden Dream. And he also felt wary of the strongest hunter, Anderson. His attempt to divine if it was dangerous to enter the book to rescue Edwina was met with failure. Klein thought deeply for a moment before returning to the real world. Then, he unhurriedly brought back Grozel's travels and removed the traces of the ritual. Looking out the window at the impending dusk, he walked to the captain's cabin's door, unlocked the door and opened it. Gourmet Brew Walls, singer Orpheus and company were all outside. None of them had left. There were even sailors who peeked their heads out from the staircase. Any clues? Brew Walls blurted out his question, but he didn't hear his voice because everyone at the door was asking the same question. Klein swept his gaze and nodded. Instantly, he heard sighs of relief. Then he saw all kinds of happy and excited expressions. If I were to vanish one day, who would act like that? Klein focused his thoughts and said to Danitz, I need an assistant. With that said, he turned to walk to the desk. All right. Danitz hurriedly followed and familiarly locked the door. Is there anything you need of me? He hurriedly asked. He looked as though he could already see his captain being rescued through his hard work. Klein stood by the desk and solemnly said, What happens next will be very dangerous. Very dangerous? Danitz instinctively gritted his teeth. You might vanish or even die immediately. Klein told him the worst possible outcome. Seeing how serious the madman, Gehrman Sparrow, was, Danitz instantly understood the gravity of the situation. His heart sank as he subconsciously became frantic. What does this have to do with rescuing, Captain? It's directly related, Klein answered succinctly. Danitz's expression twisted as he fell silent for 2 seconds. What will happen if nothing is done? Your captain might be left there forever, or she might die in the next second, Klein said truthfully. Danitz turned agape as he closed his mouth in silence. His eyes turned adrift for a few seconds before they focused back on Gehrman Sparrow's face. Gritting his teeth, he said, Let's begin. Dog's hit. He softly cursed himself. Klein picked up the pen and paper on the table, scribbled a note, and folded it into a square before handing it to Danitz. Put it into your pocket. Read it after you enter. Enter? Danitz asked, puzzled and clueless. As he spoke, he automatically took the paper slip and stuffed it into his trouser pocket. Klein didn't reply as he pointed at Grozel's travels. Smear some of your blood on the book's cover. This, as Danitz made a vague guess, he picked up the bronze dagger beside him and nodded heavily. All right. Chapter 694. Burn. Upon chanting, Danitz held the bronze dagger and sliced across the back of his left palm, but his hesitation prevented him from using much strength. He looked up and forced a smile. Although I've been injured many times, pain still leaves me afraid. Get to the point, Klein replied coldly. Danitz gave a hollow laugh. Haha, I'm just a little scared of pain. Just as he said that, he exerted strength with his right hand, slicing open a wound on the back of his hand with the bronze knife. The words he had said was apparently to divert his attention, so that he could reconcile with the idea of pain. Blood quickly seeped out as Danitz immediately put down the dagger. He dabbed some blood on his right finger, and smeared it across the dark brown cover of Grizel's Travels. After finishing that, he held his breath, waiting for a change. Suddenly, he saw a snowflake the size of a goose feather. Strong winds howled by his ears, and immediately, a biting chill wildly drilled into his body. Although Danitz was mentally prepared, he was still alarmed. He instinctively looked around to confirm where he was. He realized that at some point in time, he had left the captain's cabin of the Golden Dream. He found himself in a land of frost wrecked by a blizzard. Due to the extreme environment, he couldn't see into the distance at all. He couldn't even tell if he was on a mountain or on a flat plain. I've really entered a strange world. Captain is here too. Danitz held up his hand to block his face, afraid that the snow would get into his eyes. He calmed himself down and recalled Gehrman Sparrow's instructions. From his pocket, he hurriedly took out a piece of paper that had been folded into a square, and he carefully unfolded it. While doing this, he was especially afraid of any accidents that could lead to the paper tearing or being blown away. That would make him lose all hope. But thankfully none of that happened. He saw the contents written by Gehrman Sparrow. Recite the following honorific name in Hermes, but preferably in ancient Hermes. The fool that doesn't belong to this era. The mysterious ruler above the gray fog. The king of yellow and black who wields good luck. Burn this upon chanting. This is a secret existence at the level of a deity. Due to Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina's strict education, Danitz wasn't illiterate when it came to mysticism. He even had quite a good foundation. Looking at the piece of paper in his hand, he subconsciously drew a gasp, sucking in the cold wind and ice-cold snowflakes that left a biting cold. He immediately coughed as his expression turned twisted. He was now able to confirm one of his past theories. Gehrman Sparrow really did belong to a powerful and very secretive organization. And the organization consecrates an existence known as the Fool, a godlike existence. Indeed, such a powerful and crazy fellow can't appear out of nowhere. They don't just sprout out of the ground. Danitz tugged at his collar and tightened his clothes. Looking at the piece of paper fluttering in the wind, he wore a clear look of hesitation. He knew very well how dangerous it was to recite the name of an unknown secret existence, whose intentions were unknown. It could lead to an outcome more terrifying than death. Captain is also trapped here. Furthermore, there's no way of leaving. Danitz clasped his hands and placed them before his mouth. He suddenly threw out his hands and used ancient Hermes to recite the fool's honorific name. On the Golden Dream in the captain's cabin, with his own eyes, Klein witnessed Danitz turn illusory without any reason before disappearing. There was no longer any question about how entry into Grizel's Travels could be achieved. After patiently waiting for a moment, he heard a series of illusory pleas, and it clearly came from a man. Phew, from the looks of it, Grizel's Travels is unable to block out the gray fog. The world inside the book is still connected to that mysterious space. This way, even if I were to enter, I wouldn't be entirely cornered or lack any trump cards. Klein didn't hide his sigh of relief. To confirm it, he took 4 steps counterclockwise while chanting the incantation. After arriving above the gray fog, he saw the brilliance representing Danitz rippling outwards beside the fool's high-backed chair. The body and soul enter together. The world inside the book is very stable. There's no way to shatter it just by pulling the spirit body. Indeed, if it's possible, the divination from before would have received the corresponding revelation. Using the sea god scepter is too dangerous. Bestowing Danitz directly will only speed up his death. Klein half closed his eyes as he emanated his spirituality. After taking everything in for a moment, he arrived at many conclusions. He didn't delay, and returned to the real world immediately. Holding the bronze dagger, he wiped away Danitz's blood on it with a piece of paper. After folding a piece of paper and putting it into his pocket, he began to consider his next move. From the looks of it, Smearing blood allows direct entry. This way, I don't have to worry about my body suffering any accidents. Furthermore, I can very quickly resolve the problem. But similarly, I can't be careless. I have to be careful of any other dangers. If there's anyone on this ship that might be problematic, they might be able to sneak into the captain's cabin after I enter Grozel's travels. Sacrifice this book to the true creator, primordial demoness, or hidden sage. I'll be in trouble then. I'll definitely suffer something worse than death. The Golden Dream sailors mostly seem to be infatuated with Vice Admiral Iceberg. The fact that Anderson's superficial provocation was effective enough proves this. Therefore, telling them that this involves Vice Admiral Iceberg's life, and getting them to watch each other, so that no one enters, that will put me at ease. The problem lies with Anderson. He's the strongest hunter. He's stronger than any of the Beyonders on board this ship. Furthermore, he's good at ambushes and infiltration. There's a small possibility that he can avoid the monitoring of others and secretly sneak into the captain's cabin. His background is still too dubious, and I have no way to really trust him. I have to think of a way to get him to enter Grozel's travels with me. Amidst his thoughts, Klein flipped through the ancient book covered in yellowish-brown goatskin. He discovered that there wasn't any new content, and the story lacked traces of Daneth's existence. This is to say that one needs to successfully survive and meet up with the lead's team before they will be considered a true part of the story that will make more pages appear. Klein made a preliminary guess as he walked to the door again and opened it. Did it succeed? Flowery Bowtie Jotson and Company asked. Klein shook his head and said calmly, "Next up will be a long ritual. No one is to enter and disrupt it. Otherwise, it will lead to Edwina Edwards's disappearance forever, or even her death." After informing them of the main point, he looked around and directly said, "I suspect that one of you here might have problems. Everyone is to watch each other." Gourmet Brew Walls instinctively wanted to retort out of habit when he suddenly saw the captain's cabin was empty. Danetz, who had just entered, was gone. Recalling the captain's disappearance, and confirming that Gehrman Sparrow was about to attempt to save her after finding the cause of the problem, he nodded and said, "I'll be in charge of this matter. And they will also monitor me." Klein didn't harp on the topic. He then turned to look at Anderson Hood, who was leaning against a wall. "Come in." Anderson curled the right side of his mouth as he'd sked. "People not in the know might think I'm your subordinate. Your attitude is basically a role model for provokers." Despite his grumbling, he straightened his back and opened his stride before entering the captain's cabin. After closing the door and locking it, Klein turned to face Anderson. "Are you interested in participating in a rare adventure? You might be able to fulfill the achievement of hunting a dragon." According to his observations over the past few days, he believed that Anderson Hood was a curious and adventurous hunter. He enjoyed learning about new things and experiencing novel forms of excitement. Anderson stared at Gehrman Sparrow's face and sized him up seriously before smiling. "I'm not interested." He firmly shook his head. Following that, he chuckled before Klein spoke again. "I smell danger. A highly conceited, crazy, and powerful adventurer is actually inviting me to adventure together. What does this imply?" "It means that it's extremely troublesome and dangerous. I thought you would be interested. This is different from how you usually act. You really can rein yourself in and let go of yourself." I'll try another threat. If it doesn't work, I'll throw this fellow on a deserted island and let the Golden Dream sail off. We'll pick him up later. As a hunter, survival on a deserted island shouldn't be difficult for him." Klein quickly made up his mind as his gaze immediately turned cold. He looked at Anderson and said, "I will not permit having latent risks around myself." Anderson was stunned for a second before he quickly smiled. "Haha, it was just a joke. I'm very interested in the title of Dragon Hunter." "You changed your mind way too quickly. If you had insisted a little longer, you could have enjoyed the feeling of being abandoned." Klein nodded, walked back to the desk, and said to Anderson Hood, who had followed behind him, "Smear your blood on this book's cover. There's no need for too much." "Smear it." Anderson scrutinized Grozel's travels out of curiosity before surveying the area. Edwina's disappearance is related to it? Same for that failure of a hunter's disappearance? Alright. Blazing Danitz. I nearly forgot his name. Thankfully, his bounty is a bit higher than before. The corner of Klein's mouth twitched as he replied frankly, That's right. Interesting. Anderson glanced at the desk, picked up the bronze dagger, and indifferently sliced open a bleeding gash in his hand. Right on the heels of that, he carefully put down the dagger and smeared the blood on the dark brown cover of Grizel's Travels. After a few seconds of observation, just as Anderson was about to pick up the bronze dagger and wipe off the remnant blood on it, his vision was suddenly blanketed by a blizzard. Seeing Anderson disappear just like Danitz, Klein picked up another piece of paper and wiped away the blood on the dagger before folding it and putting it into his pocket. He wasn't sure if the trio would appear at the same location after entering the world inside the book. Therefore, he made preparations by having materials needed for dowsing rod seeking. After doing all of this, Klein held that dagger and streaked it across the back of his hand. His facial muscles twitched as he looked diagonally downwards. Only after a few seconds did he exert strength. His body shook slightly as his head turned to the side. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but open. When the blood flowed out, Klein, who was still holding the dagger, grabbed his cane and quickly smeared the red liquid over the ancient book's cover. After a short delay, Klein found himself amidst a white land of snow. Chapter 695. Stark contrast gales with icy fragments and goose feather-sized snowflakes blasted at Klein's face repeatedly. As he surveyed his surroundings, he couldn't help but tense up. He bent over slightly as he trembled. How cold! He nearly cursed out as he confirmed that he was in a land of ice and snow which had extremely low visibility. He originally imagined that the moist coldness of Backlund's winter was terrifying, but he now knew that absolute low temperatures and strong winds that were as sharp as blades were a deadly combination. Even though he had worn an additional sweater ahead of time, and his coat was thick and long, he still couldn't withstand the chill. He didn't wear sun brooch because the heat generated was psychological. It could be used to resist the influence of the intense chill for a short period of time, preventing his body from turning numb. But faced with an everlasting icy environment, it was equivalent to suicide. Heat at the psychological level made one's pores open up as though one was in summer. It would peel off the final layer of defense against low temperatures, and it would even proactively welcome it. Therefore, Klein threw the mystical item above the gray fog. He planned on using it only on certain special occasions. He couldn't afford to delay while in such harsh environments. After a preliminary observation of his surroundings, he immediately burned the blood on the bronze dagger and stuffed it into his pocket. Following that, Klein took out the adventurer's harmonica and blew into it. Amidst the howling winds, he failed to discover the appearance of Miss Messenger, Tinker Rionette, through the spirit vision he activated. Indeed, this place isn't connected to the spirit world. Or it should be said that this place has a unique spirit world for itself. From the looks of it, praying to see God would be useless. Only charms that point to the mysterious space above the gray fog would tear through the barrier. Here comes the problem. As a believer of the God of knowledge and wisdom, Edwina knows the true God's honorific name. Why didn't she seek his help? Or did she try to no avail? Yes, not every deity will personally reply to their believers. Many a time, they seem to provide feedback based on certain laws. You probably can't find a second secret existence, like me who takes on jobs like myself. Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh and made a preliminary judgment. He then put away his harmonica, took out the paper slip with Danitz's blood, and he wrapped it at the end of his cane. Danitz's location, Klein softly said as he began using dowsing rod seeking. Then, according to the outcome, he traversed across the thick snow, and he quickly tore through the frosty winds under the gloomy sky. From time to time, he would carry out a divination and adjust his bearings. After all, Danitz wouldn't wait in his original spot, as he would end up as an ice sculpture by doing so. About 10 minutes later, Klein discovered a scarlet flame. Phew, He exhaled before taking a few steps forward to identify his target. It was indeed Danitz. This famous pirate wore rather thin clothes. He wrapped his arms around himself as he walked forward with a lost expression. However, he didn't seem to be that cold. This was because scarlet fire ravens were circling around him. They were boiling the snow and blocking out the winds, bringing about a spring-like warmth. In such times, Klein especially admired a pyromaniac. Although a magician had the same ability to summon flames, it was an offensive ability that couldn't be maintained. It could only be used for a split moment. To rely on it to warm himself, he needed to constantly cast it, tiring himself out quickly. As for flame controlling, it depended on existing flames or ignitable materials. Both of them were extremely lacking in this world of ice. As he saw the fire ravens soaring into the air, Klein sped up his pace and approached. Danitz jumped in fright when he sensed someone approaching. When he saw who the newcomer was, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Then, with an odd expression, he forced a smile. Haha, there's no stars to be seen here. Getting lost is inevitable. Klein ignored what he said as he directly asked, "Have you burned it?" "I did." Danitz hurriedly nodded, his entire being effusing with indescribable fear. Klein observed Danitz for a few seconds, and, after confirming that he wasn't lying, produced the polite smile of Gehrman Sparrow. "Remember, chanting his honorific name makes you his believer." Danitz's expression twisted as he forced a smile which looked worse than crying. "I don't want to change my faith. I have no intention of believing in an unknown existence of dubious origins." He inwardly roared crazily, but didn't say a word. He suspected that any retort he makes would lead to him being buried in the snow by the madman. Klein wore a smile that had hints of madness. He added with a calm tone, "Remember, keep it a secret. Once divulged, you and your captain will both die." "What has this got to do with Captain?" Danitz blurted out. Klein maintained his previous expression as he smiled at Danitz. "Guess." Danitz gaped his mouth. With the reason known, all he could do was give a hollow chuckle. "Do I look like someone who can't keep secrets?" Klein nodded. As he took out the paper slip with Anderson's blood, he chuckled and said to Danitz, "Believe in him. Serve him. Perhaps one day, you will become a blessed like me. When the time comes, your name will spread across the 5 seas. You will be in no way inferior to a pirate admiral." As he spoke, he planned on adding a gesture as the fool's believer. But sadly, he realized that he didn't have such a gesture. All he could do was console himself. A secret organization needs to be secret. Doing all these kinds of superficial actions is meaningless. Mr. Hangman was right. No way inferior to a pirate admiral. Danitz's eyes suddenly lit up. Since I've already chanted the honorific name of this secret existence, there's really no way to avoid it from a mysticism point of view. I might as well take this opportunity. He instantly had many thoughts, having even named his future child. Hee. If it wasn't for Gehrman Sparrow's persona, I would have directly said that you would have the reputation and strength that matches Vice Admiral Iceberg when the time comes. Of course, whether she likes you will be a whole other matter. According to my observations, you stand little chance. The partner Edwina wishes to have is someone who can study and improve alongside her. Someone who can discuss all kinds of knowledge. Klein mumbled as he used dowsing rod seeking again. Anderson Hood's location. He came in too. Danitz was first taken aback, before he asked in surprise. Klein finished chanting the statement, released his cane, and determined the direction in which it fell. He then nodded and said, "I'm worried if he stays outside." "So you're also wary of Anderson Hood?" Danitz couldn't hide his smile as he echoed. "That's right. He's the kind of person who smiles on the surface, but will stab you in the back once you turn around. His reputation in the Fog Sea is terrible. There are no pirates that like him. He even deliberately tried to sully you, making us be wary of you, to view you with animosity. If pirates were to like him, it would only mean that his title as strongest hunter isn't substantial." I heard Anderson's provocations. Klein didn't reply. He picked up his cane and proceeded through the blizzard. Danitz followed closely behind, using fire ravens to scatter the snow and block out the cold, so that they too didn't need to freeze. Not bad. Quite sensible. At that moment, Klein once again experienced the benefits of having a servant. To have someone hold an umbrella during a rainy day, and someone to provide warmth in a blizzard. In the white vastness, the two appeared like black dots trudging through the snow. They proceeded forward for nearly 20 minutes before arriving at the location where the dowsing pointed to. He isn't here. Danitz surveyed the area and failed to find any traces of Anderson Hood. He didn't have any doubts about Gehrman Sparrow's dowsing rod seeking, because he was the last person to be found with it. Klein frowned as he activated his spirit vision and enhanced his spiritual perception. Suddenly he sensed something. He prodded forward with his cane, causing the snow in front of him to collapse. The collapse revealed a cave. Inside it were dark rocks that were reflecting the light from a fire. Klein crouched down. In his vision, he discovered that the cave extended into a narrow passage, and at the end of the passage was a bunch of glowing red rocks. Strange underground plants were slowly burning as Anderson Hood sat beside it. He was leisurely roasting an animal that resembled a rabbit. The fragrance of the fats and the warmth it brought were emanating out, drilling into Klein's and Danitz's noses. You guys are finally here? Wanna give it a try? There's actually a strange rabbit around here that can live in such ice and snow. Anderson bent down, looking towards the entrance as though he was greeting companions on a camping trip with him. Although he didn't say anything provocative, I really wished to beat him up. Klein entered the cave with a stoic expression. He came close to the fire and experienced the long-awaited bliss. Danitz followed in tow. He looked at the fire which was roasting a rabbit, and then at the fire ravens beside him before silently dispelling them. How did you find this cave? Danitz asked in disgruntlement, unwilling to admit his inferiority. But his body betrayed him by leaning closer to the fire. Anderson turned the rabbit which was impaled with his pitch-black sword, and he shot Danitz a glance. First lesson of being a hunter. Observe your surroundings. Be familiar with your surroundings. Make use of your surroundings. Danitz's expression immediately froze. Anderson looked at Gehrman Sparrow and chuckled. It's a cave I blasted open. How is it? It's not bad, right? I controlled my strength perfectly. As he spoke, he took a whiff of the air and said, How fragrant. The roasting seems to be done. Do you want to give it a try? Although I didn't bring any spices, there's rock salt here. It will just be a little astringent. Are you sure you can eat this? If it's a beyonder creature, you might lose control with just one bite, Danitz said with a TSK. Anderson glanced at him. Second lesson of being a hunter. Distinguish what can and cannot be eaten in the wilderness. He carefully reached out his hand, pulled off a leg, and stuffed it into his mouth as he ate it with relish. Klein was just about to say something when he suddenly felt a wanton aura approach from afar. The suppressive feeling that came from a high-leveled creature appeared extremely real. It made Danitz tremble uncontrollably. The aura swept across them without noticing the strangeness of the cave beneath it. It then quickly departed. King of the North. The title flashed across Klein's mind. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.